out of executive session.
Yes, we have Tom. Yep, at 5:05, Tom first, and Jim a second.
Thank you. And could I have a motion to return to regular session?
We don't have Linda just yet.
Oh.
She mentioned she was having a problem right before she left exec.
Would it be okay with the board to move out of executive session?
I'll move that we move out of executive session and into our regular meeting.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next on the agenda is the superintendent's report. I know Linda is not on the meeting yet.
She should be here very soon. I just resent her the link. She asked me to resend it to her.
Okay.
So hopefully just a couple more seconds.
We now have Linda, so we will move to the superintendent's report with Dr. Calvin.
Good evening, board. Great to see you all tonight. I have some informational items that I'd like to start with in terms of providing you with an update as to how things have been going across the district. I'll go ahead, Matt. All right, so first I'd like to start by saying we've had a smooth but very busy opening, I would say. We've been making sure that we answer any and all questions that come to our attention. We've done several days of professional development. Teachers have been able to do some setup, and we've been registering quite a few students over the last couple of days. We have gone through our technology and instructional material rollout. And we're continuing to hear of students who might need technology. And as we hear those folks, as soon as we get those technology pieces here, we will continue to give those out to our community as we receive them. In terms of PR, we've done a number of PR reports in addition to letters to the community. If you go on to our WBUC page or our YouTube page, you will find a number of videos as well. Some are focused on practicing safe hygiene, what to expect when students return to the classroom. As we shared at our last meeting, we're now doing technology support videos each week for those parents who may not know or students may not know how to navigate the technology. Each week, we're going to do something different based on what we hear in terms of feedback from the community. Our goal is to answer questions and show folks how to use the technology that's out there. We've also put out informational item on 10 communication items that parents need to know before sending kids back. And we put out some information on food and nutrition as well. So we continue each week to put out a number of items. As I said, our goal is to over-communicate just to make sure that parents know what's happening as we start to open this year. Our instruction has already begun. We have remote and virtual meets that have been occurring throughout this week already. In-person learning is set to begin next week. And we continue to also keep our eye on the COVID-19 numbers in the county and also in the city of Oswego. So we know that there's some growth that's happening in the county that may affect what we're doing. So we will continue to keep our eyes on those things as we're working to begin our in-person instruction here at the school district. Okay, Matt. A couple of things that we're going to be doing a little differently than what we had originally planned. The first thing is a survey tool. So we've been trying to work with a particular vendor who has an item that we'd like to use. It's called Parent Square. And what it is basically it's a communication item, but also it allows us to survey kids before they come to school, so we could know if they are exhibiting any of the COVID-19 related symptoms. So what happens is parents go on and they put in their information each day and they send that to school by a certain time. There's been a delay, not only for us, but for other districts. And so until we can get that piece with us, what we have is an alternative Google Doc piece that we'll do. We have it already constructed and put together, and we're going to be rolling that out to the community. It's pretty easy. It's a survey that parents will just go on. You can use your phone, you can use your computers, you can use your laptops, whatever you have. It's pretty simple, and you can just let us know how your kids are doing before coming to school. Most schools now are doing some surveying of students before they come to school in the morning. The other thing that we're going to just have to do a little bit differently is around our temperature checks on the bus. So originally what we were trying to do was have every kid temperature checked by a staff member when they came in the morning to school on the bus. However, we are experiencing some staffing shortages, some folks who are not able to do some of what we had expected. We needed about 28 people to do it, and we were doing some reassignments, but we've had some people who've taken leaves, some people who are not able to adjust their time because of personal issues. And so we have some shortages and we're not going to be able to do it that way. However, what we have found is a really great piece of technology. One of our local districts, Hannibal, and some other districts around the state have actually a temp check piece of technology that can actually be put on the buses. And it's a scan. When kids get on the bus, prior to getting into the bus and onto the bus, there's a scan. You can use your hand or your head, and you scan and get your temperature pretty quickly, pretty rapidly. And it does the same thing that we would have done if we were doing the temperature checks in person. So we're going to be going with that new technology. It is on the way right now. And again, other districts are using it, and it's great because we were actually concerned as to how we were going to do that. We will also be rolling that out, a little video of what it looks like so that parents know before this week's out. So folks will be temperature checked. And then also, as you know, at our buildings, people who are not coming in buses, people who are being dropped off by parents, they will also have to do the survey tool, but they'll get their temperature check as soon as they get to school, all right, before they get out and come into the building. Some updates in terms of health and safety protocols for the board. A couple of things. One of the things that we're trying to do is really make sure that we ramp up what we're doing in terms of ensuring the health and safety of not only our public, but also our staff and in all of our buildings. So a couple of things that we're doing just to make sure people understand is when people go to schools or offices, we're asking people to come in and do temperature checks. And there is a survey review. Again, those 4 major questions you have to answer. Do you have a cough, a symptom that's connected to COVID-19? And aside from doing the temperature checks and the survey reviews, based on how people survey, we may say, yes, you can come in, or no, if there's a real concern, basically. We're also going to be having some limited access to sites. So parents, of course, their kids are at school. You may have to come. You need to do whatever you need to do. But, we're certainly going to ask that, if at all possible, give us a call before you come. But we're not going to be able to have it as business as usual, where everybody just kind of goes in and out. We have to go through the process of making sure that we keep to the occupancy limits and that we keep folks safe. In terms of the educational center, since the summer, prior to the summer beginning, the center actually has been closed. Folks can come with an appointment. Temperature checks now and surveys will also be in place. They've actually been in place now for a couple of weeks. We're asking people to call for an appointment if you need something, and people actually have been doing a great job with doing that throughout the summer. We have a drop box for registration, and we follow up right away with calls and make appointments to meet with folks to go through the registration process. And I would say so far, that's been really working pretty well. Now, with tax collection, we also want to be careful with that as well. So what we are requesting right now is a couple things. First, we're requesting that people, wherever possible, if you can, we have a mail drop-in box. You can mail in your taxes, or you can drop them in a box. If you do need to bring cash, we will work with you. What we're going to ask, though, is that you do give us a call. Let us know you need to come so that we can set up a time and take whatever it is that you have to give to us. Now, with that said, there's a couple things. Go ahead, Matt. A couple things with that. Why are we doing that? Well, first of all, we have very limited space in the area where we collect taxes. And sometimes the folks can kind of all come and congregate at once. And the crowd is difficult to kind of maintain. Because we have limited space, we can't control, the crowd. This is some of why we're having to do this in partnership with the regulations that have been put out around spaces and gatherings in public spaces. We are also concerned, I come from the background where we need to safeguard our staff, and we have lots of cash that comes in, so we want to be very careful with safety around all of that cash coming in. And when people come into buildings, again, we're asking them to do temperature checks, to be masked, to also follow through with the survey that needs to be done as well. We have staff that are coming in and out of the area where we're taking taxes at. And right now we have very limited spaces around the district. We either have construction in some areas or our school buildings, and we don't want to have a lot of people coming in and out of the buildings. So, with that, and also the guidances on cash, we felt it important to try to do, I felt it very important to try to tighten up that process a little bit. So again, we'll work with our community around cash, but we just are trying to find ways to really make sure that we maintain the health and safety of folks. And boards, just so you know, go ahead, Matt. I did do a survey of our local districts to see what's happening in the region. And what you'll find is that there's a couple things that are happening. So like in one of our districts, Hannibal, they switched a couple of years ago. We received payments through the bank in town, and they found that sometimes people came in with too much cash, and there was concerns around that. Sandy Creek does not accept cash. They don't allow it. However, they have a system set up with their local bank on Monday through Friday, not on Saturdays. If you want to take cash, you can take it there, and they handle it there at the bank. Central Square also does not accept cash payments. However, cash payments can be made at a bank. So they also have a bank setup situation. Pulaski does accept cash, but they accept it at the bank, only at the bank. Mexico does accept cash. They try to encourage residents to pay at the bank in town. However, if someone comes to the district office, they will accept cash if that's what they bring. And with Phoenix Central Schools, they accept cash there, but the residents do pay the tax collector. And these comments, by the way, are from the superintendents and also from a number of their business administrators. Cash payments are taken, however, they do that at the bank or the town hall because, again, there's some concerns there around safety. At Fulton, they do allow cash payments to be done. Their payments are done to the tax collector. Again, it's at a bank. It's not in a regular site. And then APW, they do not take cash payments at all. No payment actually at APW at this time is accepted at their district. So you can see across the region, and actually this is kind of what you can see in many districts, there have been some changes. So we're saying, hey, yes, we will work with our community, but we just need to tighten it up a little bit because we want to make sure that we maintain the health and safety of our folks. And that also we secure what we're doing, basically, especially at this time. So, board, any questions before I go on with that, or any objections before we move on? Kathleen?
I do have a question. Nancy, didn't we used to accept bank? Didn't they used to pay somewhere at the bank? And why did that stop?
It was, I think it was I can't remember what the bank was that we were working with when I came.
Chase.
It wasn't, it was before Chase.
Okay.
I think it was,
HSBC used to be next to the district office. Once upon a time, it was Marine Midland.
yeah, that could have been, I'm not really sure on if that was the bank, but then they closed and they said that we're not taking any tax deposits anymore. And as a matter of fact, they said, you don't have enough money in your account, so we're not going to service your accounts anymore. So we changed over to Chase. Chase was collecting our taxes. Then they said that they were not going to do it anymore for us. It was not cost effective for them. Then we went to the Ed Center. Then we went to the county, and the county said, we're not going to do it for you anymore either. So we could go with another bank, but there was a cost factor and a setup factor with that. And when I looked at it a couple of years ago, whatever bank we went to wanted us to transfer all of our money to that bank.
Thank you. I'm remembering the bits and pieces of that now that you're saying that. But Mathis, thank you. I appreciate the work that you did on that with the questions that we had previously for that, and just the detail about what other districts are doing too.
Great. So, board, are you all good with that? First, we're good to move with that? Okay, so we will be letting the community know of those changes as we kind of move forward. And again, the goal is to make sure that we ensure the health and safety of everyone, especially right now. Okay? All right, go ahead, Matt. Thank you. So again, people will be asked to mail in checks or money orders. You can use the drop box if you'd like to. And then if you have cash, you really need to bring cash, just give us a call and we'll make an appointment and work with you one at a time. Okay? All right, go ahead, Matt. All right, just want to give you some updates on capital construction. So at Fitzhugh, we have the roof work that is completed with the exception of the skylight installation, and that's going to be delivered on the 17th. Same thing at Kingsford. Roof work is complete. Skylight installation will be occurring here. It should be delivered on the 17th. At the middle school, the water heater is now working as we need it to and has been tested. The chillers have also been turned on and tested, and that work with the chiller should be complete by 9/25. At Layton, we have some ceiling tiles in the corridor that have been worked on, quite a bit actually. The temporary doors have been installed. Fire alarms are being tested. Actually, I heard them being tested throughout the day today. The cleaning has been ongoing in the school, and lights and some tile materials have been delayed, but will not hold up the reopening of the school. At the high school, a temporary partition has been installed to keep construction away from our instructional staff. And then ceramic tiles on the ramps have been completed. The chiller was installed on the roof. The locker and band room work continues it's ongoing at this time. The site paving around the turf was actually occurring yesterday and today. And then we're continuing with the bleachers and the building construction outside near the new stadium. The electrical is being done for the scoreboard, and the ticket booths were also delivered. There's also fencing. If you go out, you can see the fencing is now starting to be put into place as well. Go ahead, Matt. With respect to phase 3 of the capital improvement project at Minetto, Riley, Fitzhugh, and Kingsford, all are in the design phase with King and King at this time. The scope has been reviewed with the district, and we will schedule a meeting to review those plans when completed with all of you as well. And also at the middle school, King and King has been working now with the analysis of the feedback from the staff to determine the process for the second step of the design and who's going to be involved in that process. And we expect to be coming back and talking with the board about that very shortly. So some great things. Brought you some pictures also, board. Go ahead, Matt. So here is kind of what things looked like a week ago at Layton. And boy, what a difference a week makes. If you walk through the building now, all this stuff is cleaned up, and they're just putting in the final pieces now. Go ahead, Matt. So here is near the nurse's office. You can see some of the tile walls. You can see some of the ceiling work that's happened, and where we were a week ago. Go ahead, Matt. Again, some of the walls and tiles, and also the ceiling work that was being done. Okay. Down towards the main corridor area. Things coming together even more last week. Go ahead, Matt. All right, and you can see the bathrooms now being put in. This is near the bathroom areas. Okay. And then out towards the stadium, there's a new scoreboard, right? Electrical wiring is moving towards that as we speak. Go ahead. There is our box up there on top of the bleachers. It was pretty unique to watch that being installed and have them with a crane moving that over. Never seen anything like it, but pretty cool. Go ahead. There's the back of that box there right now, right? And then you can see the bleachers and the box together, basically. So a lot of work happening on the stadium, work happening in buildings, and things have gone pretty well. Okay? All right, Matt. Any questions about capital construction at all, board? Go ahead.
Just when do we get our after-hours tour?
Very, very shortly. As soon as they are all set, we will be in touch with the board and we'll bring you all through. We'll get your hard hats on you or whatever we need, and we'll take you through everything so you can see all the work. And I think what I'd like to do too is do like a video tour. Maybe we'll do it with all of you all so we can talk to the community about it so they can see it as well. Sounds good. All right.
I have just one question about the and the high school. Just something that jumped out at me. A ceramic tiles on a ramp just sound really slippery to me. Is that?
Yeah.
I don't really know what's going on there. So I see Nancy shaking her head, but
Yeah.
it's not ceramic tiles.
Not on the floors. But go ahead.
Okay.
Nancy, want to say something, please?
No, it's on the walls going up the ramp because they had asbestos and we had to remove them.
All right. Hope that helps. Okay, any other questions, board members? All right. So tonight, also in terms of health information, I want to first start by thanking one of our guests again who's with us tonight, Dr. Morgan. Busy man. Hello, Dr. Morgan.
Good evening, everybody.
He has been on the phone with me for the last week quite a bit. I don't think there's even 2 days that go by where either we don't talk or there's something by email or something. So I want to thank him for joining us tonight. And in just a minute, we're going to do some discussion. We'll have him certainly work with us. Anything you'd like to say to the board before I get started here with our report, Dr. Morgan?
It's going to be a busy week. I think you mentioned earlier the college is going to be affecting us a little bit, I think, in terms of what goes on with our numbers this week. So I think it's nice that things have gone smooth for 2 days, and luckily we're inching forward. I think the plans that everybody put out were well thought out, and we're going to keep communicating with people, and that's the name of the game. If we keep communicating, then we're going to move forward.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Morgan. Just a couple of things that you should know. A daily survey, go ahead, Matt, to the next screen there. So in terms of the health department, now what they're talking a lot to us about is this daily survey that's being done. So when you come in the buildings, you're asked those 4 major questions. Do you have any of the symptoms? Have you been around someone who's had COVID-19? Those general questions. And just so the board understands the implications. So we have no problem with asking those questions. They're there to keep us safe. However, if someone says yes to any of those questions, what we do is they have to leave. We send them home. And right now, what has to happen is that before they can come back, they have to have a COVID-19 test done before they re-enter. And the symptom that they might have, it has to be fully resolved. So what's the concern about that? So sometimes we do have some staff members and students who may have a chronic cough for a while or may have an asthma-related situation that causes them to have, frequent coughs or, whatever the symptom is. So here's the problem. We can have people who have those chronic issues who may answer yes to a question at a time, who may go get a COVID-19 test, have a release from their doctor, but might still have that particular symptom. Until that symptom is resolved, they're unable at this time to re-enter our schools. So what we've already started to experience is that we have some people with chronic issues or concerns, and until that issue is resolved, they can't come back. And what that may result in is really multiple staff and student outages at one particular time. So even if the doctor says they're cleared, they can go back. If they still got that symptom, they can't come back to our schools, right? Whether they've had a COVID test or not. So I just want to share that with the board because that could force districts, like all districts, we're not above that, to shut down if our numbers with staff or students kind of start to see that big ebb and flow where that's concerned. We have already started to see that happening. So I just wanted to share that with the board. Any questions about that new piece? Go ahead, Lisa.
So this is just kind of a practicality for that. Let's say one of the students is in that situation and they have to go home. I know that we just kind of made it more difficult for people to transition from in-person to face or to online learning. In that situation, would we be able to move that student into an online class?
Yeah, so we're going to have to work certainly through that. We're preparing for that now, right? Because here's the thing, we start having a lot of that occurring. It may force us to go to a whole different model as a district. Great question, Lisa, right? And I expect that we're going to have some challenges with this, right? Not only will our district, but all districts are preparing for it because we may have children. We all know kids who have a cough from one time or another in their life, and some kids cough all year round. Basically, it doesn't mean they have COVID. Doesn't mean, but yeah, that could actually force the issue. I will say, some are thinking to themselves, so there may be a method to this, right? I probably shouldn't say this on TV, so I'm probably not going to say it. But there's method to it, almost, right? There's concerns around whether or not we should or shouldn't be doing some of the things that we're doing, right? And this will certainly push the issue in that direction. So we're all watching it, and I'm a little concerned. I'll be honest with you, board. I think every district is, because you could see, like you said, kids who were in person now being forced to go to remote, as well as staff a little bit. So we have to figure out how do we handle that as a system, and we're preparing for that right now.
I have a question.
Yes, Pam.
I have a question. I've had some experience with a daily survey, not just myself, but others. And the question on mine and others that I have experience with is, do you have any new or worsening cough, and it lists several different of the symptoms, where it says new or worsening. Because I'm sorry, people with allergies, if they have postnasal drip, they're gonna cough, and it may only be for a little bit. So I was just curious as to why we're being, obviously it's a huge health and safety, but why our wording is different than the general public out there in job places.
So, the health department gives us things that we have to follow, and we just kind of work with that wording, whatever it is. But you're right. Yeah, that's the scenario that we are already facing. There are some people who, they're good. They got a COVID test. Their doctor's saying they can come back, but we are telling them you can't, because that's what we've been told to tell them, right? So it's just going to be a little bit busy. So again, I'm sharing with the board, just so you know, as we get started, this might become a challenge. We are already experiencing it. Okay?
Thank you.
All right.
I'd like to ask a question about substitute teachers. Will we be using them this year? And if so, has any training been offered for them?
Yes, we will need substitutes. We've already started to work on training with our substitutes. I know Heidi did some work with them before the school year even started, and we'll continue to do that throughout the year. So we know that there will be times when people literally are sick or have some personal business and they can't, be online on those days. So in those cases, we have already started to work with them to show them, how do you get on Google? How do you work with the class virtually? We've already started that training process to make that as smooth as we possibly can. So yes, we will still need substitutes, and we've already started training them.
So how are we getting through that enormous list of substitutes to train them? Are we doing them by seniority? Are we?
So Heidi, I know you're there. You can certainly help. But we've already started by, we've already started to do an assessment of who is willing to come, right? Because we know that there's some people but I'm not willing to do something if you want me to be in person or if you want me to do virtual, because I don't know how to do that, right? So we've already reached out to each building to find out who are the frequent flyer subs, right? And we started already with training those. And then we're just doing them a group at a time. We're just making our way through the list to try to make sure we get as many of these folks up to speed as quickly as we possibly can. Heidi, is there anything else you'd like to add to that besides what I've just said?
Just that we put an invitation out a couple of weeks ago to all of the subs who had returned the letter of assurance saying they were coming back in the fall. And we held 3 different sessions. We've trained about 120 to 130 folks. We know that there were some people who couldn't attend one of the sessions. And so we have another one scheduled for next week. Patty Perfetti and I are working on that. We'll do another training for Google Classroom, COVID. Christina Chamberlain joins us. And then I go through the normal orientation pieces. And then we'll run that monthly. Anytime we're adding new subs, we'll do another orientation.
Thank you so much, because I know that even in a normal year, we're always running short of subs. So, okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, go ahead, Matt. All right, so tonight, I'd like to now shift a little bit to talking a little bit about, quite a bit about athletics. Over the last couple of weeks here, we've heard a lot from our community about athletics, and I wanted to just share a little bit tonight and really kind of get into some decision making around our athletic program for this year. Go ahead, Matt. So first of all, we want to be clear. We all, I think, understand the importance of athletics, not only to our community, but our students, our parents, our community as a whole. My feeling is that, athletics certainly prepares our students for the future. It teaches collaboration and teamwork. It helps to elevate academics. We know that there are kids who probably would not do as well without athletics, right? It expands leadership and provides time management skills, and it constructs positive character traits while also sharpening fitness as well. So I think we are all in agreement that athletics is certainly important to our community and important to the educational program that we offer for our students. Matt, you can go right ahead. So within the last 2 weeks, there's been a couple of things that have happened. First, school districts received information from the governor and also from the New York State Public High School Athletic Association, which came about a week or so ago. Upon receipt, district leaders and medical officials immediately began to review this guidance to understand the requirements and to figure out and really determine what we might be able to offer for our students. Since we received that guidance, we've also received 2 additional pieces of information from NYSFA. The first piece was that they now plan to move, Section 3 plans to move all fall high-risk sports, football, volleyball, and cheerleading, to the spring of 2021. And then the second bit of information plans to move forward with low-risk to mid-level sports, and that practices could start September 21st. And once we received again that information, we began to utilize it to inform our decision-making and planning. So let me just say this. By the way, Rhonda is on with us tonight. Rhonda, are you there? I believe she's there. Rhonda Bullard, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
All right, great. So if I'm saying something wrong, Rhonda, certainly you can feel free to let me know. Just so folks know, the document that we've received from Section 3, it's not a small piece. It's over 50 pages. It's nearly 50 pages long. And there's lots of information that we need to go through and review. And that in addition to the information coming from the state, the CDC, there's a lot of information to go through to help inform our decision making, and that's what we've been really working through. I'd also say, so those are the last 2 pieces of information, but also just today, we learned that in terms of competitions around swimming, that they're going to be moving swimming to another time frame. Rhonda, can you share that with us really quickly, please?
Yes, as a league today we met to refine some scheduling, and it was decided upon because not every school in our league has access to a pool. So what we decided to do is, as a league, voted on it, and we are moving the girls swimming to the fall 2 season as well, which will be in March.
So, we've heard a lot from our community about, decision making, but I have to tell folks that, this has been a very busy couple of weeks. Every week there's been something new that has come out. So trying to pull the whole piece together is a little bit challenged, but hopefully now we can get going where we need to move, but each week we've learned something new. So I just wanted to share those things with our folks. Go ahead, Matt.
Mathis, can I ask just a quick question?
Sure.
Actually, just ask for clarification. Could you possibly, you and Rhonda, dispel the myth that you've been doing absolutely nothing waiting for this guidance, that there has been plans in place?
I don't know where that came from, but that is just completely untruth. I have to share, we've planning for 3,600 kids is a lot of work. And at this level, in the middle of a pandemic, and you have all the health and safety that's involved, it's not just one person can do it. And it's not something you can do like just fast overnight. I have to say the timelines that we've been given this year by the governor, by the state health department, by every place is just unreal in the middle of a pandemic, right? We had a week to kind of really work through stuff. And that's a lot. That's a lot that has to be done. So I would say, first of all, no one's just sitting around being lazy and not wanting to do anything. We are working very hard, just the opposite. And so I put a letter out to the community and asked that they be very patient. A week's time is not enough to really kind of work through things. And things have changed so quickly and so much that it's been just very difficult to kind of keep up, because every week, just today, we got another piece. And it's like, okay, what more is coming? So we're just trying to really figure it out. And I have to say, it's been a lot. Our cabinet has been meeting. Rhonda has been a part of our meetings. Dr. Morgan has been on with us. And we're also consulting and working with other districts to try to figure out what everyone is doing. And I would say across the entire state, especially in our region, from when I talk with our CSO groups and our athletic directors, no one is just sitting around doing nothing. Everybody's very busy and trying to interpret and make sure that we're doing the right things with and for kids. Okay? I hope that answered the question, Heather, or the concern. All right, and so with that said, there's also been some nice information that's come out. And what is that information? We've learned that as a part of the guidance that no sectional tournaments will be able to take place this year. Participation in contests would be limited to the CDC and New York State Health Department's guidance that's out there. And in terms of the recommendations and guidelines, we've learned that league play becomes a priority this year. Travel for non-league or out of section contests should be limited in compliance with the State Department's of Health's executive orders. And that due to the challenges with facilities and available officials and transportation and other opportunities for younger student and athletes, individual schools and leagues really are able to make determinations regarding student participation in sub-varsity level competitions. Lastly, we've also learned from Section 3 that schools and leagues should create intramurals activity opportunities for students if they're able to do so. It's certainly a suggestion, not a requirement. Go ahead, Matt. So what could be offered in our school district? So after getting some of this guidance, we just started to think about what could we do, right? So there are a couple things that we would offer at this time. One would be girls tennis. Another would be boys golf, soccer, cross country, and then girls swimming and diving. Go ahead.
Wait, I'm sorry. I thought you just said swimming and diving would be gone.
So it could be offered, but now so this presentation was done prior to our meeting, and we just learned that late this afternoon. So, okay. We can offer it, but not until March. Okay. All right. So when making these decisions about what we would offer or wouldn't offer, there are 4 areas that we have really had to go through and really take a look at. The first is health and safety. Students and staff must be safe at all times. There are some required and recommended protocols that have to be followed. The district really must have the capacity to provide the programs while also ensuring safety, right? It's just not something we can just say, hey, listen, let's just do it. There's protocols we have to follow. The second is with respect to transportation. So we need to think about making sure that we can provide the transportation and that the transportation has to be safe. As you know, board, now we have some spacing limitations on buses. A 60-passenger bus can have up to 21 people in them, and that's it. So we have to make sure people are socially distant and that we're doing temperature checks when kids get on buses. We also want to make sure that we take a look at, and we looked at equity and access. So what's important is making sure that all kids have access and opportunities that we might offer to them to the greatest extent possible. And then we had to also take a good look at costs, and you'll hear about costs today. And we knew that by doing athletics, we had to look at things like staffing costs, PPE, security, screening and temperature checks, cleaning and sanitation, all of which are things that, some of which we had not planned for in the budget of this year. So those were 4 major areas that we had to really look at. And I'd like to just take a moment and share. I've heard from community members about things that other community organizations may have done. And people have said to me, well, this organization have done this. Can't you do this? Right? I have to say, I don't know what the regulations are for some of our community leagues or groups. I'm not familiar with those. But I can tell you that when we are a public school, there's quite a bit of regulation that we get from the health department, from the CDC, from the state of New York. And my hunch is it's much different in terms of planning for 3,600 kids as compared to a smaller league. I'm not sure because I don't know what the league's information is, but I know what ours is. And it's quite a bit. So just wanted to share that a lot goes into it. And these are 4 areas that we really tried to look at. Go ahead, Matt. So in terms of health and safety considerations, go ahead, Matt. We looked at a couple things. First of all, the regulations say that there has to be some health and safety things in place that students follow. So students have to make sure, of course, that they are socially distancing themselves 6 feet apart whenever they're indoors or outdoors. And then also they have to wear acceptable face coverings unless players are unable to tolerate face coverings for some of those physical activities. Students have to tell coaches immediately when they're not feeling well. They're not supposed to be doing hugging or high fives, shaking hands, or fist bumps. And they have to safely distance themselves at all times, including pre and post matches, practices, and games. Matt, go ahead. With respect to coaches have to also keep those 6 feet distancing, that 6 feet distancing maintained. They have to make sure that they're wearing the acceptable face coverings. They need to make sure that they provide clear expectations for their athletes from day one. They have to communicate guidelines in a clear and consistent manner to parents and students. And they have to make sure that there's no hugging, high fives, shaking hands, fist bumps, right? And all this information, by the way, is taken out of the guidance that we received. With respect to coaches, again, they also, go ahead, with parents now, my apologies. Parents need to make sure that they are maintaining 6 feet of social distancing whenever they are at events, the spectators and parents, and then they have to wear their face coverings as well. And then they must really work with us to make sure that they are disinfecting their child's personal equipment after each game or practice. Go ahead, Matt. Officials are responsible. They also have some things they need to do, and they're responsible, of course, for the management of the game, but they have to ensure their 6 feet distancing. They have to wear their masks and face coverings where needed, and then they have to also make sure that that they are keeping up with all the regulations with respect to the games or the contest. With respect to screening, so the New York State guidance that we have received says from the state says that a couple of things has to make sure that are in place. The first is, one moment, that screenings have to be done. So the responsible party, which would be us, have to make sure that we are implementing mandatory health screenings, including temperature checks of students, faculty, and staff, and where applicable, any contractors or vendors and visitors. We also, according to this guidance, it tells us that we have to make sure that we implement mandatory daily health screening and practices for employees, not just the students, but also the employees, where practical, also with vendors. And we should also be encouraging this same screening and masking with our patrons and our spectators as well. Go ahead, Matt. Some general considerations that we must think about also from the guidance is that we must emphasize to to all participants the importance of washing hands and using hand sanitizer before, during, and after competitions, that we have to also ensure facilities have been properly sanitized and have hand sanitizer, disposable masks readily available for practices and also contests. We have to make sure that we're cleaning and disinfecting frequently touched surfaces and equipment, including balls. We have to make sure that we are making sure that there's no hugging, high five, shaking, or fist bumps in place. And I would like to point out to the board that in some of the guidance, there is some competing kind of language. In one area, it says one thing, and another area of the guidance, it says another thing. It's kind of weird. And we're supposed to follow all the guidance that we're getting, right? So from the one example of this is in the New York State Department of Health guidance for physical education classes and or activities. It tells us that we are supposed to make sure, it requires that we keep kids at least 12 feet apart from each other, especially when they're involved in an aerobic activity. However, the NYSFA is abiding by another New York State Department guidance piece that says, hey, you know, we don't have to follow that 12 feet physical distancing that should be occurring when they're involved in these aerobic activities. So it's kind of like, that's kind of weird. Like in one area, the state says one thing, in another area they say another thing. And I'll be quite honest with you, in some areas it seems as if Section 3 is taking whichever one kind of goes with what their needs are, which is like, that's not great, right? It's very confusing. But go ahead, Matt.
So Mathis, real quick. So if there are two competing things coming there from the state, I'm interested to hear a third opinion, maybe from Dr. Morgan.
Well, the idea of if you use 12 feet away, that would prevent almost any sport activity from happening. You know, because even in soccer, you're going to be getting close. I think that we have to use the shorter distance, the 6 feet, 12 feet. It really is. It's when you're aerobically working out, you're breathing heavier. You theoretically are producing droplets that are going further, and even in the outside area. So that's where that science came from. But I think it's very unrealistic to think that we can keep people 12 feet apart in competition, particularly something like soccer or even cross country, because they're going through the woods and they're nearer than that. I think that was I hate to say the state made a mistake, but I think the 6 feet in itself is difficult. 12 feet would be almost impossible to maintain.
And so for us, you know, Boyd, you know, we talked a lot with Dr. Morgan, you know, and we'll get through this as we move through the end of our presentation. There are some concerns, right? So with 6 feet, certainly that's a safe distance, we know. But, you know, when kids are involved in some of these sports or activities, there's no way they would be able to maintain even 6 feet, because it's not the nature of the game or the work or the activity that they're involved in, which creates some concern, some serious concerns in terms of health and safety. Okay?
Mathis, I'm sorry. Back on the last one. I believe the 12 feet was for physical education and not necessarily.
Yes, that's correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that was a different than in terms of competition. And if they're allowing soccer, you know, I mean, you're going to break a 6 foot distance all the time.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yeah. It is really surprising that we say to kids that you cannot, that you should stay 12 feet apart in aerobic forms of activities for PE, but in competition or athletic competitions, you don't have to do that. It just confuses a lot of us, to be honest with you. It's a surprise. So in addition to that, we also have some additional guidance there that says, again, students have to make sure that they are ensuring that 6 feet distance from each other. We have to, again, make sure we got face coverings in place. Social distancing must also be maintained during things like, you know, national anthems or sideline kinds of activities. Outdoor sports may need to also extend, we need to have extended bench areas for social distancing. With indoor sports, we have to make sure also that the bleachers or multiple levels of seating have the proper social distancing in place. We have to have a hydration plan in place so that kids certainly are not, or adults are not using the same kinds of materials or touching the same items. With respect to practices and competitions, they want to make sure that only essential personnel are there at those practices or competition sites as authorized. And then with personal items, each athlete needs to bring their own items. They need to make sure that they put their items in bags and that those bags are 6 feet apart. And then with the media, it's not a business as normal. They need to call ahead and have conversations before the actual games so that we can ensure proper levels of people who are there, and then also social distancing. Go ahead, Matt. So there's some other considerations that we know. We have to make sure, again, that we have screening protocols in place for all of our events and practices. So when players come to practices or at events, everyone needs to be screened. We need to make sure that we have a plan for if someone has a COVID case. We know that. They come and tell us they got a case. We have to have a way to make sure that we not only have screened that person, but we don't allow them into events or activities. And then also, we need to make sure that we have capacity limits that we look at. Our capacity has to be now reduced down to 50%. Social distancing has to be in place at events. Face coverings have to be required and are offered. We have to make sure that we have things like bi-directional foot traffic in place. In places, we have to make sure that we're separating our entrances from our exits, that we rearrange waiting areas and lines and parking areas to maximize social distancing, and that we also make sure that cashiers or ticket takers wear face coverings when interacting with the public. Okay, Matt. For spectators, we have to make sure that spectators are limited to only 2 spectators per player. And then with 6 feet physical distancing, we need to make sure that we are encouraging that physical distancing between individuals and our family or household units at all times, that we are making sure that we follow the gathering limits. So I know that there are people who probably just want to come to see their kid and they may not be able to get in, but even outside of the area or around the zones of where the games are going to be held or contests are held, we need to make sure that we are enforcing gathering limits so that we don't exceed the gathering limits in the county. And then we need to make sure by regulation that we have proper signage in place for students and staff and spectators, and that we also facilitate appropriate distancing through the use of markings on the grounds, seating areas, and other signage. Okay, go ahead. With respect to cleaning and disinfection, we need to make sure that we ensure adherence to hygiene and cleaning and disinfection requirements. There are some pretty stringent hygiene and cleaning protocols that need to be followed. We have to also put into place hygiene stations, places where there is running water, disposable paper towels, hand sanitation. Those things need to be in place. And because many of these contests are outside, what we need to we would need to either buy new ones or rent ones, right? Then there again needs to be signage that's visibly you can visibly see it right away. And then the cleaning and disinfection protocols are such that we need to make sure we're providing appropriate cleaning and disinfection supplies, and also that we're getting to those high touch areas wherever possible. Also, with respect to cleaning and disinfection, we need to provide appropriate cleaning for those frequently touched areas and encourage employees to use supplies wherever necessary with kids. We need to make sure that we are doing really a rigorous cleaning program. So typically, the games, we'd have someone in and out, maybe before the game, after the game, possibly in the middle of the contest. But we now know that has to be much more rigorous because so many people are coming, touching surfaces and whatever else have you, so that we need more staff to do that. In terms of restroom areas, they should be cleaned and disinfected more often, depending on the frequency of use, according to the regulations. And then distancing, again, we have to make sure we have certain markers and things in place that deal around cleaning and disinfection. Some additional items that we need to know is that we have to contact schools beforehand to make sure that semantics are worked out, that we follow all the guidelines and review those guidelines. Prior to the game day, there needs to be rules and regulations that are talked about and then followed on game day. Pre-game conferences need to be limited in terms of the number of people that go. The official tables have to, really only include the essential personnel. And then we have to make sure things are not done like normal, like pregame and postgame ceremonies, and handshakes. And then also there's some training responsibilities. We need to make sure that a professional development program is in place for all of our coaches, our students, so that folks know what needs to be done. And then some additional things that we need to think about after looking at some of those regulations there is also the staggering of time. So every year we stagger our athletics. We start JV and varsity first and then modified. And one of the things that many districts are doing is they're definitely doing what we always do. And for us this year, it would look like we would start JV and varsity. Whatever we start, we'd like to start that on the 21st and then modify it on the 28th. Okay. All right. So now in terms of specific team considerations, there are a number that you need to know about, board. The first is with respect to cross country. And with that, the first thing that they've kind of put out is that, teams need to be limited to 12 participants from each team this year. So, with teams with districts that have 4 or fewer teams, there's limits. That means that a number of the kids who would have participated before, they may not be able to actually be in some of the runs. The numbers are usually much larger than 12. So that's one of the things that's come. Again, no handshaking, no hugging, fist bumps. They're asking that we stagger the cross-country contests and waves or intervals, that we meet organizers, think about our course layout, that we may need to make revisions to the course layout because kids can bottleneck at certain areas. It's recommended that we have about 200 yards from the start line to narrowing points. And then also that we consider, again, widening our courses, think about corrals and for those larger meets, consider alternative means of finishing places so that we don't have congestion at finishing lines. They've asked us to think about getting and using image-based equipment at finish lines to assist with picking places to avoid congestions. And make sure we have a hydration plan in place again. Some of these things certainly have cost implications to them. Most of them do. And then with respect to golf, this one was the easier one in terms of some of those regulations. They say, hey, listen, your tee start should be staggered. That when directed, each player should move to the first tee, remaining socially distant. Scorecards and pencils shouldn't really be shared. They should be exchanged. And then those safety protocols with social distancing and masking certainly should be in place. Go ahead, Matt. Soccer had a number of things. First, we had to make sure that we've been told that we have to limit the amount of attendees to head, referees or center referees, that there needs to be a single captain from each team, that we need to move the location of pregame conferences to the center of the field. All of the individuals have to maintain, of course, social distancing. We have to suspend handshakes. We need to make sure that the team benches, there's certainly enough space there. And then substitution procedures have to be in place as well, which include hand sanitizing, social distancing. Go ahead, Matt. The officials table certainly has some things that need to be looked at, like limiting tables to essential personnel, visiting team personnel. Goalkeepers, can't do things like they would do in the past, like spit in the gloves. But there's a mandatory, by the way, 2-minute hydration and mask break that has to be offered in the middle of these contests. At the first dead ball situation or after 20 minutes, kids have to be given those mask breaks if they are wearing masks. And then the use of dropped balls are also suspended. Go ahead, Matt. With swimming and diving, even though that's moved, just so you know, we have to ensure that all individuals maintain social distancing, that at any time individuals are 6 feet of each other, and not in the water. They should be wearing the mask. They have to ensure coverings, of course, not worn in water, but also limit the size of a single group of people on the premises or in the water to 10 or fewer individuals. So that certainly is going to be something in terms of how many people could be in the space. We have to the occupancy of the premise of the pool should be limited in terms of number of people attending. And then we have to ensure different groups of people are separated by at least 6 feet, and there needs to be physical barriers in certain areas. Go ahead, Matt. Swimming warm-up areas certainly have to, permit limited amounts of swimmers per lanes. we need to be restricting the number of swimmers in a competition area, limiting the number of swimmers in lanes, diving warm-up areas. Also, we need to create multiple sessions. Divers may not approach the board until their turn is to complete. Hot tubs are not permitted, of course, at this time. Dive order sheets have to be posted in multiple places. Team seating and lane placement, has to be on opposite sides of the pools. Preparing athletics for competitions. Some of that stuff that we were doing in the past with clerking areas should be eliminated. And then warm down for relay teams. We need to keep proper social distancing to 6 feet for those pieces there. Tennis, we need to maintain social distancing, of course. All of the equipment needs to be sprayed down with disinfectant spray. We have to make sure that the practice equipment is touched by only the coach and should be cleaned frequently. We need to use an alcohol-based disinfectant to clean tennis gear. Consider ball machines, using balls, tubes, and basket pickups to pick up loose balls, and then avoid unnecessary equipment such as throw-down lines. Go ahead. So, as you can see, and we're pretty much getting almost to where we need to get to, but there's a lot that goes into this. It kind of goes back to Heather's piece where she said, hey, are people just kind of, there's questions out there, are people doing anything with this? There's a lot. And board, I've tried to bring this to a concise piece for you. That 50-page document plus the other 2 groups of documents, there's a lot to consider. This is not as easy as just jumping in and saying, let's do this or that 1 week right after the other. You got to really think through a lot of this, and that's what we've been doing. With respect to health concerns, some other concerns that we need to think about after going through all the guidance and that we've been talking through is one of the concerns that we have is the mixing of cohorted students from one school or one area to another area. So just so we know, there will be mixing of kids from one zone to another zone, depending on what those sports are that we're doing. All of them will have that. The other thing that we need to keep in mind is that, the guidance says that, again, as we talked about, PE, you need to be masked, maintain that 12 feet separation. However, practices and some sports will not be able to maintain that directive. We need to think about who's going to be riding with kids. Sometimes, most of the time we have a coach on with all of our kids, but because of the social distancing piece now on buses, we may need to have some additional adults to help out with that. Cross-country trails, we know some of them are not as wide as we need, so we got to do some work around that. Construction in the district is also taking place. So some of our home games, it may be difficult for us to maintain some of those things. So our gyms also, just so you know, board, many of them are being used for PE or parts of them have storage in them. Childcare is taking place in some of our gyms, and some of them are used as isolation rooms as well. Okay, and then with respect to monitoring the limited amount of spectators, that we're going to need some extra help and assistance with. And then we will need to have an isolation system in place when students come to practices demonstrating symptoms. So we have isolation rooms in all of our schools as we're reopening, but we'll also need to have the same thing in place when kids come and they're demonstrating some of those concerns. And we have to make sure that we have the right medical staff around to assist us when that's occurring. Okay, go ahead. Now, with respect to transportation and equity, again, it's important to me that we have that kids, all of our kids have access to sports because they make such, athletics, they make such a big difference in the lives of all kids. So to ensure equity, one of the things that we need to really work on is transportation services, because we know if we were to just say things like, whoever can come, you get there, it's going to disenfranchise some of our kids. So we will need some buses to pick kids up. Our general practice has been, kids will go to sports study hall and then they can just stay after to attend athletics. But because that certainly is going to be a challenge this year, what we need to do is go out and pick up those folks who need busing. All kids we don't think will need it, but those who will need it, we'll certainly have to go and pick them up, bring them in. And those buses will need to be sanitized and socially distanced. And we know that we have to think about the limited buses that we have to pick up kids because, they're doing waves of different runs already, whether it be between dropping off our elementary kids or our BOCE students. Some of our buses will already be out and about. Can we do it? We can, but we certainly want to make sure that we provide that because without it, my feeling is that some kids will be disenfranchised right off the bat. Okay. Now, costs are also some things that the board certainly needs to think about. So, in terms of costs, there's some fiscal concerns that we have that we want to keep in mind is that, we got to think about what we're doing in terms of coaches. Let's say the season becomes done halfway through or even after a couple weeks or maybe towards the end. Do we pay coaches for the whole season or not? We'll need to do some discussions with our collective bargaining unit on that and also create an MOA around that. And then also, we want to keep in mind that we do have a looming 20% reduction in aid. And certainly, whatever we do, we want to keep that in mind. Go ahead, Matt. So also with cost, just so the board knows, we've factored in some critical things. So first of all, cleaning and sanitation. We have to have some additional cleaning of our facilities due to the events. We know we're going to have to do some additional things around bathrooms and bleachers, spaces, and we have to do it more often than we were before. Buses will require extra sanitation. We have to have in place sanitation centers. Portable bathrooms, I think we're going to need for sure. Some of these things we'll either have to purchase or secure. And then we will need sanitation solution to make sure that we are properly cleaning areas. So these have some cost to them. In terms of transportation, again, those extra bus runs we will need. And then safety, we know we're going to have some additional PPE in place for all who are attending. And then if kids come or staff come and they don't have it, we need to have that available right away. With respect to staffing needs, so a couple of things. You heard me talk a lot about screening and temperature checks. We know we're going to have staff who can do those items, both the screening and the temperature check. We need to have security at events because there's social gathering limits. We're not sure how every member of our community will respond, but sometimes there may be people not too happy. We have to say only 2 spectators per sport, and we have to make sure social distancing is occurring. So we know we're going to need some security. We would need someone from our nursing staff to assist us as well. If people come with COVID-19 symptoms, isolating kids or staff, we certainly need to make sure that that's in place. And then bus drivers, possibly monitors, depending on how big the teams are that we have. We know we're going to have to, we need to have those costs there as well. And then, by the way, with our cost projections, there was the limitation. We weren't able to put in the swimming part because we weren't sure what was going to happen. So we're actually okay with the presentation because I didn't put in the swimming part. But as we move through, we need to keep in mind that there may be some additional cost when we do bring back swimming in the future. All right, go ahead. So what do those costs look like? So we looked at the amount of students that we think might possibly participate. We looked at, we have varsity, JV, modified, and we tried to pull what we did was pull how many we think may come on each of those teams and put together a full number. So in terms of possible participants for soccer, we know we could be up to 112. Golf, at least 10 kids. Cross country, we typically have around 48. And then tennis, at least 14. And those numbers could fluctuate, right? Depending on how many kids may want to be involved. But those are the numbers that we took. We tried to do some average there and maybe put 1 or 2 additional there. Transportation costs for away games. So for soccer, we have, because of the number of teams, about 10,000 in cost. Golf, 3,600. Cross country, 1,800. And then tennis, 1,800. To do the pickup for practices, we know there's going to be a large cost for that for soccer and cross country, about 4,200. I'm going to have Nancy talk about that in just a minute. And then golf and tennis, we had about 10,500. For security at the events, we don't anticipate we'll need a lot of security there for golf, but for the other events, we had a standard cost about 4,100, just over 4,100. For screeners, for just the tryouts, it'll cost us around $600. For games, we're looking at about 2,700 for screeners. For cleaning equipment, that'll be about $500 for soccer, cross country, and tennis. For custodial services, we anticipate about $2,500 to pay for our custodial support. For the signage that's needed, costs are about $200 for soccer, cross country, and tennis. Additional field bleacher markings, we believe for soccer and cross country about $2,500, $1,500 for tennis. For our nursing support, about $1,000 for soccer, cross country, and tennis. There may be some with golf, but we think that number will be a little bit more manageable. We could do some things around that. With hand washing stations, so we could buy or purchase our own. They'll be about $1,000 a piece, or we can rent them, and they're still almost near at about $1,000 amount. And then we have the total cost for just soccer is $67,386. For golf, $14,000. Cross country, $58,000, just over $58,000, almost $60,000. And then tennis at $26,486. Our regular yearly costs, you can see those costs, what they typically are. This is what we budgeted actually for those activities. And then here's what the additional cost would be when you add it all up. So for soccer, it's $57,000, golf, $10,500, cross country, $57,100, tennis, $24,600. So the additional cost that we're looking at right now is $149,000 for just those four. We haven't put in yet the swimming because we weren't sure what was going to be there. Nancy, can you talk through the pickup cost for practice for just a moment and some of the other items here listed as well?
Absolutely. So for pickup for practices, I spoke with Tom Gunn, and he said per sport, we would have to have 4 buses each day that would have to go to the north, south, east, and west areas to pick up kids. So that's how we calculated it at 4 buses per day, $300 for the run, times 5 days a week, times 7 weeks for that sport season. So that's where we came up with the calculation for soccer and for cross country. Golf is only varsity boys, so that cost is less expensive, and the same for tennis because that is only varsity for the girls. In terms of our regular transportation cost, we calculated that based on the number of games for varsity, JV, and modified. And I worked with Rhonda, and those costs are included in our budget, as Dr. Calvin had said. In terms of the additional field and bleacher markings, those are going to have to be redone quite frequently. We're going to actually spray circles on the field where people can stand or place their chairs, and that paint doesn't stay there, so that's going to have to be continually done. I don't think there was anything else, Dr. Calvin.
Okay.
Can I ask a question about the transportation?
Go right ahead.
First off, are we getting kids home, or are we just picking up?
We are only picking up.
So what we had planned to do was pretty much what we typically do. We get them here, right? And then parents generally pick them up. So certainly we could drop them off. Certainly what the board would need to know is that there's a cost for that. So we could certainly do that if that's what the board wishes to do.
Well, I mean, that answers the next question, because we have a lot of people who are alarmed by the amount of money and wondering why we would do that when normally, parents have been responsible for transportation. But I think there's a number of responses for that. So, Dr. Calvin, can you respond?
So again, I think, so it's not just some parents. When kids actually in the past have done athletics here, there hasn't been really a lot of cost for getting them to the athletics in terms of the practices because they're right here, right after school. Some of the kids will get extra help after school or go to a study hall, and then they can just come or go to wherever their practice is, basically. But now that opportunity is not there. So we have to figure out a way to get them here so that all the kids can truly participate. Now, some parents, again, may say, hey, I'll drop my kid off, and that's okay. We're fine with that. But we do know, we're very clear that some of our kids will not have that ability. Many of our students, parents don't have cars, don't have transportation. And so, if we're going to do this, my feeling is we need to find a way to make sure that all kids who want to have an opportunity have an opportunity. And I think to really make sure access occurs, we would need to pick them up. At least we should pick them up. And then we will go with what we typically do. Parents would need to partner with us and come and grab them and take them home.
So I think as you look at this, you may find that initially we're spending a lot in transportation, but that as teams get going, team members get to know each other. I'm not sure with COVID if we can ride share, probably not, but you may find that the need for the transportation decreases over time, depending on who makes a team and that. But right. Initially, I think it's very important for tryouts and that is offered,
Yeah.
So it's not a barrier for kids.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I would, yes, Heather, you make a great point. And I would, at this point, my suggestion would be that wherever possible, people don't ride share. Now, I know some parents will do their own thing. We get it. But because of COVID-19, we would encourage parents not to do that wherever possible. But yes, we agree with you on that, Heather. Other questions from the board? Hi, Kathleen, go ahead.
Hi. Yeah. Just looking at these numbers, I think that once this is started, I think you're going to find that some of these numbers are going to be a little bit overestimated from what you get. For the transportation, for example, I think more parents than not are going to be willing to provide transportation instead, just like typical season. Why do we need screeners for games? I guess, is that part of the guidelines from?
Yes. So we can't force people to do our screenings, but why do we do it? Because yes, it's in guidance, right? That when people come, you want to keep the spread down. So the way you do it is you screen them and you do temperature checks. So as we were going through, I was reading so many times with the guidance that says screen them, temperature checks, all those things. Yes, that's a part of the guidance, right? We know that there may be some people who refuse to take part in that, but the goal is to make sure that we keep everybody safe to the greatest extent possible, right? This is unfortunately the time that we're in, and we need to screen people however we can. We do it in all of our school buildings, in all of our offices, and so yes, that's why we would do it.
Even it's actually part of the guidelines.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can certainly go in there and see. And what I did was in the presentation, I actually put the page number. You saw some page numbers as I was moving through. That's where we got it from. I actually put page numbers and paragraphs there. Now, we can't force people to wear a mask. We can't force people to, do certain things. However, what we would be doing is truly trying to do as you would do when you go to a number of offices or community places now, right? Screening people and trying to make sure people are safe. And again, I would agree with that because, again, we're talking about kids here and our general public, and we're trying to be really careful and safe.
And as far as the job sharing, I mean, you've got kids that are not the job sharing, the ride sharing. I mean, a lot of these kids that are on some of these teams, that is their bubble. So they've been around these kids all summer, whether it's been baseball or playing volleyball, down at the park, whatever. I mean, that is their bubble. So they would be allowed to job share. Why do I keep saying
job share?
But the $1,000 for a hand washing station, what exactly is that? I mean, when you go into a store, you see just hand sanitizer, on a pump. That I just have, why would that be so expensive?
So when you go through the guidance, it talks about having actual water, like running water for people to be able to wash their hands. So they're supposed to be able to wash their hands for at least 20 seconds or they can have the access to the hand sanitizer. Some people use both of them, and that is in the guidance. So we don't have in some of our places running water, right? So what we would get was one of those the portable, hand washing and sanitation stations. They run anywhere between $700 to $1,000. We've looked and looked at all the quotes to see what they would cost us, and that's what those are. And again, that comes out of the guidance. Just to back up also, so with respect to the ride sharing, we would not dictate to any parent how they wish to transport their kid, right? If that's their choice to ride share, that's certainly up to them. We would just recommend wherever possible that people kind of think that through. With respect to the transportation costs maybe being less, so what we try to do is give our very best conservative guesstimate that we could. Sometimes, things change on you and go down a little bit less. Sometimes they may go up, but we try to give it our really best and not overestimate to the point where it'd be undoable. And I know these numbers are a little bit bigger than most of us would like to see. Certainly, I kind of went, oh my goodness. But there is a cost. And we just want to make sure that we let the board know and that we inform everyone of what's involved by doing this, right? So I hope I was able to answer your questions, Kathleen. I see Pam has her hand up.
Thank you. screening for games, it's not listed under golf. Why?
Because we believe that the golf area there has some of those things in place that can assist us actually.
And we have to screen everybody for outdoor events. I mean, it makes perfect sense when somebody's coming into any of our buildings, but this is outside. All of these sports are outside.
Yeah. I mean, you got to kind of go through the guidance. And yes, I mean, even for the practices, time and time again, it talks about screening kids before they come. Because, again, there's this transmission piece. I got a doctor here on with us. Dr. Morgan, your thoughts about some of this?
Well, the trouble is, the 6 feet apart in an athletic event is a fallacy. It's not going to happen. So we need to screen people there because they're going to get closer than 6 feet in many cases. So
are we talking just screening for the athletes, or are we screening the spectators?
Anybody who's there. I mean, because the spectators are also means for spread. So if there's somebody at the event, they need to be screened. And you can't differentiate just the people on the field. You have to have whoever's there. And whoever's there may be closer than 6.
Thank
so
you.
We have to screen. Is it better outside than inside? Absolutely. But we still have to screen everybody.
So why couldn't you use the things that you're installing on the buses that people are going to walk, the kids are going to walk through, and that's automatically taking your temperature instead of having to have trained
You're still going to have, when they have one of those things automatically, I assume it's going to be the bus driver that if they don't have a screener.
Right.
So you still, if you have one of those at an event, you're still going to have somebody who's monitoring it.
Correct.
So and that automatic screener, that's a lot more expensive than the infrared temperature guns that we're using. So if you have to have a screener there anyways, you might as well have the infrared, not the more expensive one for the bus, just because we don't have a screener for that bus.
Right. So what we, and with the screener, getting the actual person, it actually could be a little bit cheaper. So, think about the crowd size that comes to some of these events. You need about 10 of those temperature check things, and those are like almost 200 a piece. And then you add that up. That's about 2,000 by itself. And then you still need somebody, when someone goes through that thing and they don't pass the screening part, you need someone to be there who can say, hey, you need to kind of go back. We prefer that you not come in here. So you're going to pay for the equipment, plus you're going to pay the cost may be more, is what I'm saying, Kathleen. Does that make sense?
It does. Especially for the transportation, I think most parents are going to provide transportation alone. So I think that cost is going to be down. So I don't think we're going to see that cost as much as what we're estimating. And I get that you went over a little bit on, because you've got to do worst case scenario, I guess.
Yeah.
But and it is frustrating because, all summer long, you see Little League baseball, and they're under completely different guidelines than school districts go for. And then school districts are responsible for so much more. And that's what's frustrating. I mean, the same thing with, daycare centers, same thing. Those kids 4 or 5 years old can be there without a mask on, sitting right next to each other at their little table. And it's a daycare, so they're different guidelines than what we're doing with our elementary kids. It's just extremely frustrating.
Yeah, I would echo you, Kathleen, because, as we've been going through the guidelines, one group follows what another group does, and sometimes they don't follow each other. And you're trying to work through them, and we're talking to doctors. And I don't think, as I said, I've talked to doctors more. I don't think I've ever talked to so many doctors. Don't get me wrong, I love doctors. But, Dr. Morgan and I, just this week alone, at least 2 or 3 times between last week and this week.
Yeah,
it's just trying to work through them, and it can be frustrating. I would acknowledge that. Okay, so there are some costs. Go ahead, Heather. I'm sorry, and then Pam, go ahead too.
Can volunteers be used for any of it? Obviously, there's some stuff that's total contractual that it couldn't be.
Because this is COVID-19, and we're dealing with health sensitive issues. At this time, I would really recommend that we not use our volunteers at this time. This would not be the time for that. We have to make sure we properly follow protocols with cleaning, with sanitation, with social distancing, with checking health issues. We need people who have received the proper professional development and who really have been trained in those protocols and skill sets, especially now with COVID-19. So I would say at this time, this would not be the time. We love our volunteers, but this would not be the time to use them for this right now.
Thank you. I did just want to ask that for the public because I have a feeling that might have been a question out there.
Yes, I have gotten that question. Excellent. Heather?
I just wanted to ask Dr. Morgan, if we follow all of these protocols, do you see it as us, do you see the potential for us to keep our athletes and our families safe?
In actuality, no. This is the best that's available, but this is not a perfect world. And unfortunately, the governor, in my mind, did not give us as clear a setting as we would have liked. We're trying to balance here the importance of athletics and trying to have safety. We want to all move on in our lives. There's no question about it. We will have some positives coming out of here. We're seeing it in professional sports where they're all being tested 3 or 4 times a week, if not every day. And just consider what that cost alone would be. And even they haven't done very well. In the beginning of baseball, Tampa Bay, it's close to 80% of their team had positive COVID. So there is no perfect thing. We will have some. Hopefully the number will be low. And if we adhere as best we can, that will keep it as low as possible. Some of the more higher risk sports, I know they're being moved to a different time. We may find this fall with the lower risk sports that we still have too many cases. So that may make us rethink for the spring that maybe we can't do any of the high risk sports this year. We don't know. Just like with the school, we're going to be looking every week, how many cases do we have? We're going to be doing the same thing with athletics. We have added another variable that increases our chance of spreading by permitting sports to go forward. This is not, it just makes it more difficult. And I'm not trying to be evasive, but we will have some positives, I'm certain. And the biggest cohort is when we play other teams. We know what we're doing in our system, and we may have more money to spend than some other systems. We may be more diligent than other systems, and we may have more people who are going to test positive with the other teams. I'm not saying our teams are better than others, but that's the other variable, that we're not in charge of the other districts. We're only in charge of ours. And you had mentioned, I would say we should be bold and say everybody there has to have a mask. If you don't have a mask, then you're not coming to our school district. I'm sorry, that's what we should be saying. There really is not a suggestion of a mask. You need one, and you need one that works. Gaiters do not work. They are completely ineffective, and they may be worse than no mask whatsoever. The latest studies have clearly shown that. And if you look at the National Football League, even SU, they're wearing gaiters. They are worthless. They are absolutely worthless.
So are you talking about wearing masks while you're playing?
If possible, yes. I realize I'm talking about everybody that's on the spectator area, and everybody who's assisting and all the screeners. Some sports, it'll be very difficult to wear a mask. There's no question about it. And I realize that. And I don't see, if we play football, the National Football League has now created a new helmet that's, it's probably a $10,000 helmet. We're not going to be having that at high school. It's not going to happen. But it's supposed to be screening and acting like a face shield and a mask at the same time. That's not what we're going to be having, or most schools are going to be having, or inner city schools in Syracuse School District are going to have. We have to be realistic on, there's a limited amount of money as well. But that's why we're having these discussions,
Thank you. And then Dr. Calvin, I just had one other question. Is there any value to having parents sign waivers?
Well, I'm not sure. I'd have to check that with our legal folks to see about that. I'm not sure if we can force parents or ask for that, but I would need to check. Is there value? There may be value. I'm not certain without having reviewed that first with our legal counsel. Okay.
I have a question about if we do go ahead with fall sports, just in terms of the protocols once it's in place, because I think Dr. Morgan is right. It is going to be an increased risk of transmission. So if a student who's one of the athletes tests positive, does it mean that everyone else on the team goes into quarantine for 2 weeks?
So I'm going to let Dr. Morgan answer that, but I would say it really depends. So each situation, it depends. It depends on how close they've been, where they actually had contact. We'd have to evaluate that with the health department and with Dr. Morgan to determine that, basically.
Unfortunately, the state doesn't give us really good guidance on this at all. And I think we have to talk to the Department of Health in our county. But yes, if there were 10 kids on a bench and didn't play, and the affected student was not anywhere near them, this is where contact tracing in a really minute area would be involved. And this is one of the complicating things. It really is. There are some people that would say, yeah, you have to quarantine everybody on that team, but then that would eliminate the sports right away. And we have to, and the guidance in that 50+ page did not clearly say on that at all. So we would probably defer to our Department of Health for our county to help assist us in that a little bit.
I have a question about you were saying masks absolutely for all spectators, but isn't that why you use social distance? So that you don't have to?
Well, that's a theory. You're going into the stands, you're walking by other people. There are times that you're not within 6 feet. When you're in a stagnant area in a classroom and they're 6 feet apart, and then you can safely say, okay, we're going to take a 10-minute mask break. We're going to take a 20-minute mask break for lunch. When you're in the stands, nobody's really watching everybody in the stands. You try to stay 6 feet apart. Somebody goes down to go to the bathroom. It's just easier to say, wear a mask when you're at an event. And by doing that, you'll decrease the chance of spreading. And that's what we all need to be careful of. We need to decrease the chance of spreading. And we as adults, and most of the spectators are going to be adults, I'd like to see us set that example. It's not that much to ask somebody to wear a mask. You're going to a school event. There's young children involved and young adults involved, and we're trying to give them the safest environment possible. So wearing a mask shows that you care about the people around you.
I understand what you're saying, but I go back to the mandate, which is if you are able to, unless you have a health condition, because right. That's what I always go back to is that, I'm not judging people if I see them without a mask because I assume that they have a health condition that they cannot wear one instead of just saying that they don't care. But anyway, and I do care, and I care about this district, and I have for years, and I care about what's going to happen here. And my biggest thought since this whole thing started back in March was just for the social and emotional well-being and that the mental health for these kids. And I think that we have to at least try something and try this in order to get these kids to get a little bit of their sense of normalcy again. And is it going to be restrictive? Yes, it appears that it is. But their mental health, we pour so much money into the district, into their budget, our budget every single year with counselors, school psychologists, pulling in, contracting with different. I feel very strongly that we need to try something because I don't feel that what we're doing is completely healthy for all of our kids.
So, we hear you, Kathleen. Any other comments or questions from the board before I move forward? Jim, you want to say something? And then I see Pam.
Quick question. So it seems to me that, swimming, football, cheer, and volleyball, we have basically 4 sports now that are being pushed to March. I'm wondering, maybe Rhonda would know some of this from her conversations with other athletic directors. I think about a truncated season where a coach is going to have tryouts and try to get a team together to compete. I think there's going to be a lot more interest for some sports that didn't get an interest because the volleyball player also loves to run. We're multi-sport athletes, and I'm just wondering from a coach's perspective or an AD perspective, what do we think about that?
Yeah. Go ahead, Rhonda. Just take yourself off mute.
So we've talked about that today. We've met throughout every week as a league, as athletic directors, virtually, of course, since we were shut down, working on schedules and different things in hopes that COVID would go away, but that's not what happened. So we've been modifying things as we're getting directives. And that's our biggest concern, is that it seems like each week there's some other decision that's being made that's pushing this off a little bit to buy people time and to buy maybe a vaccine or something along those lines like that. So right now, what we've talked about as a league is that we have to be cognizant of the fact that with some of the sports being moved, you are going to look at some of the kids that would have played football, would have played volleyball. So we're looking at seeing mass numbers if sports are to happen that are going to try out for the sports that we have offered. And that's going to be a managerial thing. And then also the fact that just as of today, they limited those down to a number of 12 per team that can race for cross country. So it seems like every day it's a little bit more restrictive or limited of where we're really honing in on a smaller population of kids that we actually can help out. So it's just, we're all frustrated as a whole entire league, because it seems like as Dr. Calvin has said, as we're flying as we're building the plane. So did that answer your question, Jim?
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of what I thought, that the demand is an unknown right now, but I really think there are multi-sport athletes that are going to want to play something.
Yes.
And if these are the only ones offered, those coaches are going to have to make some decisions, like you said, managerial. And there could be some kids that have run for a while who may not make the cut because somebody else was able to play.
Yes. Tom and I think Pam, I saw the two of you.
Mathis, I'm wondering if you could tell me what the population of the high school is.
The population in terms of the number of students, the exact enrollment number?
Right.
Heidi, can you help me with that number? I don't want to get the wrong number off the top of my head.
Sure. I don't know the exact number, but it's usually approximately 1,150.
Okay, so, seems like it's a small amount of children that will be supporting out of the high school by only offering these 4 sports. And we can only have 12, you said, on cross-country teams?
That can race. 12 can race at a time, basically. Am I right, Rhonda? Rhonda, am I correct? 12. I think it's 12 at a time who can race. I think you can have more in the team, but I think only 12.
You can have more that practice, but you're only allowed to have 12 people, whether it's a home contest or an away contest. So it'd be 12 varsity boys, 12 varsity girls, 12 modified boys, and 12 modified girls.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Pam or Tom, I think you two had a question.
Yeah, I did. I mean, one's the economic approach, and I was just wondering, what are we saving in terms of busing relative to not utilizing the high school and the middle school now in terms of offset relative to this?
I would not say that we're saving a lot. I'll let Nancy answer that. We got to remember, now we're having to do a staggering of buses, and we have to do social distancing on buses. So we used to get 60 kids on, but now we can get only 20 on. So I think, Nancy, can you answer that a little bit better for me?
Absolutely. So as Dr. Calvin said, we, instead of doing one bus pickup in the morning for a certain group of kids, that may take 2 or 3 buses. So we're triple tripping buses right now. We have 60 buses. We're utilizing them every day. And on Wednesdays, we're utilizing them for food service deliveries. So we're really not saving any money on our buses or our fleet.
Right. And keep in mind that for athletics, help me, I want to make sure I'm right, Nancy. I don't believe that athletic bus runs are aidable. Am I correct?
They are not.
Right. So.
My other question would be relative to Rhonda in terms of, again, I also think that the number for pickup, is there any way we'd be able to do a survey or find out relative to parents and would they be able to bring their kids?
Yeah, we could.
Yeah, because we might be, again, I'm just looking at the numbers and it may not work because one is the economics, but more importantly is the safety. And that's when I defer to Dr. Morgan as well, because I think we are, whatever we're doing, we are introducing more transmissible situation and more groups and populations together. So that's the one thing, unless we can do it safely or to the best that we can, then we definitely have to think about this long and hard.
We'd like to start surveying right away once we get through our meeting tonight to figure out where the board is at, but we can survey and we would be ready to survey. Rhonda, did you want to add anything else to that? No, she says no. Okay. Tom, did we answer your questions?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I think Pam had a question. I saw Lisa as well.
Yeah, a couple. I have to piggyback to Kathleen about the social emotional. I have concerns about unhealthy choices that students may be making if they don't have an athletic avenue. It just is a scary thought. And I think a survey is important. We're running numbers, but let's survey the kids. Who's going to go out for, who is actually going to go for these sports? I know that varsity cross country girls didn't even have 12 runners, let alone, people to be caught. That was last year. Will sports increase? I would think some. I think some multi-athletes will come. That might not be always a bad thing. I don't think these numbers are going to be set in stone. I think we'll see some of those go down. I think if we can get our ducks in a row. Rhonda, do you think it's doable? We can do it safe? I think we have to let them I think we got to give it a shot. Right. I think we have to let our athletes prove, and our parents in our community prove that they do care about each other and we can do this.
Right. So we, in the next slide, we'll kind of let the board kind of deliberate there and we'll give you our final recommendations, but can we come back to that point in just a minute there? I just want to make sure I get any other questions we might have. Is that okay, Pam? She says okay. Okay. Lisa, did you have another question at all?
I had, I guess, maybe a clarification question, although what Pam just said makes me think it's not. Well, so initially, before Pam spoke, so the number of 48 for cross country had to do with the number of students who were like the 12 varsity girls, boys, modified. But if more kids wanted to practice, because I'm a firm believer in like the sports for the social emotional health. And I think actually, but we're looking at, to get to what the point Linda was making, if we count just high school, it's like 16% of our high school students are what are encompassed here. And 5% of our students overall in the district. So I don't know if this includes intramurals or if that's a different thing. But I'm getting off point. Let's say 48 students for cross country. If more students than that wanted to come out and practice with them, but not go to the matches. I'm sorry, I'm not runner. Not go to meets. Thank you, Tom. Not go to the meets. Then the transportation could be even more, right, than what so I think a survey would be useful.
So we would certainly, right away put out information, like we're ready to do that tomorrow, to say who's interested, start getting numbers, and then we'd start going right from there, right? So I hope that answers your question, Lisa. I don't know if I got to your question or not. Okay. Jim, I see you had a question.
Well, it's more following up on this, and I agree with everybody about the social emotional, especially for at-risk kids. There's two choices sometimes, and the athletic choice is the choice that keeps them out of trouble. And I can absolutely know that happens all the time. I wonder, piggybacking off of what Lisa mentioned, it made me think of it when she mentioned intramurals, and then going back to what Dr. Morgan said about bringing in other communities and interacting with other communities. How much thought have we given to doing something different rather than having extramural competitions, getting strength and fitness regimens together that students can participate in, using maybe we have a strength coach or an athletic, trainer, trying to do more club type stuff so that our kids are interacting, they're getting physical. They're working within our own community to cut down on one of the concerns Dr. Morgan had.
I would say we put a lot of thought into that. So one of the things that we did was we've talked a lot about intramurals. Actually, what might we offer? What might the board be interested in? But we kind of wanted to see where things went today in this conversation and share with you our thoughts and then kind of go from there. Can we create an intramural program? We can. Actually, the guidance talks about where possible, one thought might be you could provide intramurals, right? So that is something that could be done. Could we do it? Yes. The board should know that we need to, again, go through it, all the regulations. We need to also understand that there's a cost to it, right? But do I think we have the staff who could do it? Do I think there's some pluses to it? I do. Can we do it? We could. And we have thought a lot about it. We just sat down as a full team and we went over every scenario. So we could come back to the board with information around intramurals.
And can I just add, just what Linda and Lisa were, about the small number and what Pam's saying about, these kids with their idle hands, what are they doing? This isn't just about athletics for me either. I look at marching band and those kids and what are they doing right now? Do they have any opportunities? And I know that that's a whole new thing because, I'm married to a trombone player and there's spit that goes everywhere when he's playing. But so I get that, but what things can we do? Because our our 7 through 12 kids are not even meeting in person.
Right.
So what other things can we provide for them so that we are doing more than what Linda's saying with the 5% or 16%? I don't even know what the number was, but.
Sure. So I would just like to add that we, in previous board meetings, we have shared, let me go back. I think we're all on the same page around the social and emotional needs of our kids. I don't know that there is, most of the folks who I've been meeting with and talking with and working with as a team player here, all are really concerned about the social and emotional needs of our students. We truly are. And I'm a parent. I have a kid. I have 3 kids, and I certainly understand the need to make sure we meet those social and emotional pieces. I'd like to say that aside from athletics, there are a number of other things that we're doing. So we have a strong counseling staff in place who is certainly going to be working on some programs and working with our kids throughout the week. But also we have extracurricular clubs. I believe in our agenda this evening, if I remember correctly, we have a number of clubs that we're going to be offering to kids because we know that kids need something more than just being on a class throughout the day. It's a tough time. It's a frustrating time, right? I wish that things would be better, and we hope that as this year moves along, that we'll get to, I feel we're going to get to the other side. This is not forever. This is a temporary thing that we just need to go through right now, like every district. And as we go through those, we're looking for every opportunity we can to support kids. But there are a number of extracurricular clubs and activities that we've talked about previous to this board meeting, in board meetings, and also that we have up, I believe, this evening. Aren't there a couple up tonight, if I remember correctly, Heidi? I don't have my packet right here in front of me. Heidi?
Yep, we have the high school extracurricular clubs. We've already approved the middle school extracurriculars, and we worked very closely with the advisors to come up with a feasible online remote opportunity. And then with the hopes that throughout the year, if things improve, then there are those same opportunities they would have had in the past to perhaps get together in socially appropriate and safe ways.
Right. And our goal is, this is our reopening plan that we've just kind of put together. It's not the end all plan, right? We hope that as soon as things kind of start turning around, that we can get those kids in as soon as we can. But I hope that answered your question. We are with you we are certainly with you that the social and emotional piece is important. I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's multiple ways to meet those needs, and we are certainly looking for every way that we can. And we already have some things that we're doing. With that said, I think athletics is a part of the picture that we need to weigh as well, right? I hope that helps. Does that answer your question? I hope so. Okay. So, Matt, can you go to the next page, please? So, in terms of analysis, we kind of looked at where there were concerns, where there weren't. And then I think now we need to kind of get into where the board is at. Go ahead. So, personally as a team, we've kind of really gone through and said, where do we see concern for where do we think we don't see as much concern? So tennis, we think that, again, those 4 areas, we think we can do things okay with tennis. We think we can make it happen. We think that with equity and access transportation, we're okay. Our biggest concern with all of those sports is we need to keep our minds on the not only the kids, but also there's a cost to everything. So we certainly have listed concern there. Soccer, I would say to you, we are concerned as a team about the health and safety because they're so close to one another. It's a contact sport, whether we want to say that or not. Kids are very close to each other. So I do have some concerns with respect to that. Equity and access, we can provide that. Transportation, we can work through that. Cross country, we think that there's some things we can do. It's going to be around how we might maneuver our tracks, how do we the courses, excuse me, how do we widen some things up, because the goal with cross country is to pass one another, and we need to kind of work through that a little bit there. With equity and transportation, we're okay. Golf, we think we can do golf safely, no problem at all. Swimming, well, now that's moved, but when we were looking at some of those regulations, we think we can work through the swimming as well for kids. Our biggest concern of them all is the soccer piece, to be quite honest with you. And I know that's a very popular piece in our community, but it is of concern. Dr. Morgan, I know you and I were talking about the soccer. What's your thought?
I agree. I think this is a good summary from our multiple conversations that we had as a group last week. And the soccer, really has a lot of similarities to lacrosse and football. I'm not quite sure how it was rated in a lower sport in terms of activity. It certainly crosses above the low risk, I think. It is popular here. There's no question about it. But it has probably the greatest potential in terms of spreading COVID if it was there. Is it insurmountable? No. And I know a number of other districts are planning on moving forward with it. I would anticipate that may be the most problematic one, but we have no statistics to say that yet. Section 3 says we can move forward with it, but I think it is the most problematic in terms of spreading of COVID if it was exposed on a team, on a field that we have to be concerned about.
So, that's kind of where we're at. And I guess at this point, I know Pam started sharing some pieces. Let me just make sure, I'm sorry. So I think now what we want to do is kind of answer any questions or get your thoughts here. Can you go to the next slide there, Matt? And I just wanted to make sure I answered 2 questions. We had a question that came about, just some points of information. We had a question about what was our athletic budget from 2021. What's the budget? Well, there is the budget number of $798,000. Our transportation cost for athletic that's been put in the budget is $150,000. Okay, and then how do these numbers compare to our years previous? So it's difficult to compare them because the only line in the chart which is included in the budget is transportation for away games. The expenditures could potentially be over the budgeted amount. And then the concern is if there is increased student participation, additional buses may be needed to socially distance students on the buses. If we eliminated some sports, the question was, wouldn't that somewhat equalize any increase beyond what we spend each year? And the answer to that would be that, we're not planning on eliminating any sports at this time. The Athletic Association has moved some sports to other pieces of the year, basically. So, we plan to, as if all the sports are happening. And as if the league cancels anything, we will adjust if they do that. It would be impossible at this point, I would say, to equalize any increases with offsets from potential sport eliminations that may not happen. Again, we haven't eliminated anything because it's just been moved to a different part of the year. So with that said, I think we're back to next one there, Matt. Board thoughts. What are you all thinking? Pam, you started to share, and certainly you can start us out. But then I think you may want to make your way around the board. Whoever has something that they'd like to share and say.
I'm thinking we go forward with it with our safety and protocols in place. I think we have to try it. I have concern going to, without putting any plug in for any particular store, there's concern to go in any store here in town that there's a potential exposure. I just think we have to try.
Jim?
I kind of could use a little bit of a history lesson here, because one of the things that you mentioned about our possible state aid being reduced 20%, could you please remind us, what would that equate to?
Nancy, help me, but I believe it's $7.1 million of a reduction.
Okay. So, and this is where some of the board members, maybe, Kathleen and Linda and Heather can help. Back in 2016, 2017, we really had to do a big budget cut. We were in need and we had to do a lot. And if my numbers are correct, from the budget that was passed since the previous year, it was a $3.3 million reduction. And so what I'm kind of wondering, for those who have been around or have knowledge of it, Nancy too, when we made a $3.3 million reduction, what got hit? What did we have to do without in those years? Because that was 3.3 million. And I remember a lot of grumbling, and you're saying 7.1 now. So maybe a little bit of a history of what that budget crunch did to us. What did we have to do without during that time might help inform what's going on now and in the near future with our budgets.
So do you want to start with Nancy, or Bort, do you want to start and then Nancy goes with that, or do you want to start? You all right with Nancy beginning?
I'd like Nancy to.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nancy.
Okay, from what I can recall, because I haven't revisited that in a long time, we know that football was cut that year. We know that, we know that clubs were cut, and there was a big fundraising effort to get clubs back. We know that there were at least, and again, this is off the top of my head, 40 or 50 positions that were cut. So those are actual people that were put on the street. It was a very, very difficult, traumatic year. But if we did not make those decisions at that time, we wouldn't be where we are right now.
I think all modified sports were canceled, if not all sports.
I think maybe modified. I know intramurals were out. I can't recall modified.
Senator Ritchie came in with money that salvaged modified, but we as a budget process had to cut it.
It was modified. What, Linda?
Travel, class travels,
Field trips.
Right.
Yeah, and it was, Jim, like Nancy said, it was close to 50 positions. A lot of them were, as many as we could do, were done through attrition, so that we weren't laying people as many people off, but it was 50 positions that were eliminated that year.
Okay, and that's part of what my concern is, looking at a number like 7.1 million. You know, I know what we're talking about now is a total of about 167,000, which is a drop in the bucket of 7.1 million. But I also look at it as that's 2-3 teacher positions possibly. So, you know, I'm trying to look at the future and seeing what we're going to have to come up with, because the state, you know, we're basically in the worst economic position we've been in since the Great Depression. And I know people have been using the Great Depression as a milestone in the last 10 to 20 years with housing bubbles and tech bubbles and whatever else you may have. But it's truly, we're surpassing those right now. So I didn't remember what the 20% equated to.
Yes.
Or how it related to, you know, what we've done in the past, which was 3.3 million in that budget cut.
Yeah.
So thank you all.
Yes. Lisa, your thoughts? I see Lisa there. Would you like to share your thoughts, or Heather?
Heather, you can go first.
Okay, well, my thoughts are many. First of all, everyone talks about the social emotional. I think we buy into that, which I absolutely do. We make the transportation important because we do have a large number of kids whose parents will be working at 2:30 in the afternoon, and we don't have the advantage of just coming from school. And Jim, you talked about at-risk kids. You're going to find a larger proportion of those kids falling in that group. I've had community members come to me and say, you know, we've always brought our own kids. We've always been able to do this. Well, yeah, that's been something we've done wrong, I think, is relied on parents because it's great if you can, but you're excluding the kids who cannot. And I think the numbers are bigger than people think. I also think that there would be a lot greater participation if they didn't learn in modified that you're not welcome if you can't, you know, get a ride, or you're not part of the feeder programs. I could go on and on about all of that, but the numbers are much bigger than what people think they are based on current varsity and JV numbers. So I agree with Pam. I think we have to probably try to do this. Jim, I would love to see an intramurals program. I think that'd be fantastic. I think it's a lot to put together right now, but I think that's the most inclusive. Unfortunately, that does not fit the needs of varsity kids, your juniors and seniors who are looking to attract colleges. And I know that we don't exist to do that for them, but it is definitely something that, you know, we do exist to help kids move on to the next stage in life. So I think we do have to be somewhat sensitive to that.
Lisa, your thoughts?
Yeah, I have many thoughts too. So I guess, can I just start with a question about the state aid cut? When, I'll use the definitive because I think it is coming, because New York State has not yet released its budget for this year. So when it comes, it's actually going to hit us this year, correct?
We're in it right now. We're already experiencing the 20% loss right now. Now that could turn around if the feds kind of, you know, work things out.
Yeah.
I don't see it turning around anytime soon, like before November.
Right.
But that could change tomorrow, right? But right now we're already seeing the 20% withheld. It's already started.
So on the one hand, I'm very concerned with us being able to pay our bills this year. Right? Like, we've made some decisions because it was already in the budget, but having things in the budget doesn't mean that the budget matches the revenues that we think are coming in, right? So I'm concerned about that. On the other hand, if we allow the sports to go forward, and Heather, I know your kids played, so this is coming from my ignorance. If let's say we just played, right? Like, or we just practiced, like allow the students to practice, but not actually play games. You're saying that's going to put the students at a disadvantage? Or because like Buffalo just canceled their sports program. But so are they really going to be looking at like people's records this year? You know what I mean?
I actually think that's an option for everything up to varsity. Now, Rhonda might be able to speak better to this because she's in that arena. None of my kids were looked at for scholarships in sports, so I don't necessarily have firsthand experience, but I know I'm getting a lot of feedback from parents that are concerned about that when their kids are seniors.
What we've been told, and this is just what we're hearing, is there's not a lot of people that are going around scouting. Typically, any of the seniors, they would have been seeked out in their junior year, so they would have already had some information. But right now, a lot of colleges are on hold with their sports programs. So there's kids that are already existing either as freshmen or scholarship holders. So right now, if those kids chose to opt out, they're not being punished if they are having college sports. So we haven't really gotten a lot of great guidance from New York, from the NCAA. But that's what we're going on from right now is that we've been told that there's not going to be a lot of travel for recruiters because of COVID. So we do, I'm getting letters and I then give them to the kids. I drop them off at their house or any other kind of thing that I contact that I'm getting from colleges for our student athletes. And what is happening is they're working directly with that college per the letter that I receive in the athletics department. And then I make sure I either, one, give it to the coach, two, I readdress an envelope and get it directly to that student, or three, I'm actually driving to that house and I'm dropping it off and leaving it as I let them know, hey, I'm leaving this for your child. That's what we've been doing.
Okay, thank you. So I guess my position on this is thinking in the little bit longer term. I have very high doubts that any of the spring high risk sports, or what's been now moved to spring because they're high risk, are going to be able to run. And I think it's in that case, I think since we do already have the money budgeted, even though we may not actually have the money, I think it would make sense to approve, like my opinion is, I think it makes sense to approve this now for the lower risk sports and at least try to get those in. But with the caveat that I am still really concerned about the reduction in the state aid makes up part of our budget, right? Like that's part of our anticipated revenue.
Yes.
So, and it, maybe things will turn around in the spring, but I don't see. Yeah. So, I guess I said I'm all over the place, right? It's because there are so many competing. Like these are all really important, and these are really important needs, and they're all competing with each other. So, yeah, it's challenging.
Jim, can I give you a little more just a little more history that I'm sitting here remembering? So 2016, when that happened, there were a couple things that happened to get stuff back in. One was there was a huge community, like Heather said, Patty Ritchie had some money, limited amount that helped out. There's a huge community effort, and they came up with a ton of money, and they gave that back to the district to get the sports reinstated. I believe at that point I don't know because I was off the board at that point. Heather and I were both on. Linda, I think, was the only one that's here still. But then that following year, a lot of those positions that we had eliminated the year before were put back in. And I was not on the board at that time. I mean, Pam was at those meetings, but some of those positions were put back in, and I don't understand how that happened either. But that was part of this history going into it from that year.
And Kathleen?
I do know, looking at the budget numbers, that following year, we added 3.33 back to the budget. So while it was taken out in that 16-17 year, that nearly full amount was put back in the very next year budget, which is probably why we were able to rehire people.
I believe they were hired throughout the year gradually, right, Pam?
Yes, almost at every meeting, there was another position put back in, pretty much. Yes, throughout the.
It was when the state aid caught up to us, correct?
I think so. It would make sense that that's what happened. But yes, throughout the entire year, the following year, positions were put back in.
And the reason for that huge loss at that point, there were two things that happened. The new plant negotiations, we were amping down from the point that we were at, and we were losing millions from that. And it was a declining over the next few years. And then that was the other part of it, was waiting for that state aid to catch up also. So thank you, Pam.
Kathleen,
Can I just go back? Lisa had mentioned, or I'm sorry, Rhonda had mentioned that like the senior athletes were already looked at by colleges. They were looked at in their junior year. Well, our juniors last year in the spring were not looked at because we had to close down. So this year's seniors, any of those spring athletes, lost that junior year opportunity with college coaches. And they're not doing visits like Rhonda said, but those coaches are reaching out to the student athletes. They're asking to let them know if they're having meets so that they can pay attention. They may not show up, but they're going to reach out and find out how they did.
I don't know.
May I ask a question, Mathis?
Sure, go right ahead.
I know we're talking a lot about sports, and I'm doing a lot of listening, and my head's spinning also. But the question I want to ask is, are we going to be able to have a musical this year? Are we going to be able to, I'm thinking about the other types of things that we do for children and wondering if those are going to be in place.
Right. So I would say musical, I don't believe we'll be able to do that. It depends on how things unfold throughout the year. There may be some virtual choir kinds of things that we can do, or musical kinds of things, but they would be virtually this year. So there'll be some things that we can do, but it'll be done in a different way.
So if we don't have a musical, or the kids don't go to NISMA, does that money, like the teachers don't get paid for that, right? If it doesn't happen.
It depends on if the board approves them or not, right? So if the board doesn't approve them, then I would say no. Right? However, I would just like to remind the board that, at our last couple of meetings, we are, sharing with you, like the PPE cost. There's other things that have to be moved around. Like our PPE cost was, how much was that cost for the PPE alone, Nancy?
We've probably spent $300,000 to $400,000 in PPE.
Right. So so some of the monies we'll have to move them to into other areas to cover some of the cost of this year. I hope that answers your question, Linda.
Well, I'm thinking about the students and their need for activities within the district. So I had to see what else they're going to be missing this year. The other kids, what else can't we accommodate this year? And I'm not even looking financially at it, just at what kids are not going to have the opportunity to participate in.
Great. Yeah, things will be definitely different than what we've had in the past for this while until we get through this. Yes.
Well, then with that being answered, I think I'm leaning towards letting our sports open up for this September 21st.
Okay. All right. So we've got Kathleen and then Tom, I think. See where you're at.
Oh, I thought I was
where you were. I just wanted to make sure you were still in that circle there.
I think we should at least try and do something to get this thing going. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But at least we tried.
Okay. And then Tom?
I'd like to try, but I want to look at, there's got to be a way that we can do it financially responsibly. I think we're in a situation where we just got to be mindful of that. Much very refer to what Jim was saying. If we end up, and these are potential positions, and our ultimate goal, our job one is education, and I always refer to that first. So if there's ways that we can do this, we can look at it and find, what offsets and make it happen. I think we can go and try to achieve it safely. I wanted to ask Rhonda one other question, which was, does Section 3 have any protocols in place as to positive cases on teams in terms of numbers that it supports? Or, do they have any protocols that says, okay, if somebody's positive on this team, they're not now we're not traveling, they're not going to take them at Fulton or whatever?
No protocols on that.
That's on the onus of the host district. So
Right.
if we were to host somebody, that's on us to be able to then do the screening and then to report that out. So that's on us. The section's not doing anything in regards to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's no protocols that I'm aware of. It's kind of like she said, it's you working with your medical folks and informing other folks, but there's no set protocol on that.
Nothing standardized.
No.
Okay.
Because we're cross-county. So our league is, Onondaga County, Oswego County, we're cross-county. That's why I think that the section didn't do that.
Okay.
So Tom brought up a good, because I was thinking this and I forgot to mention it, but so you're looking at, you get so many mixed messages straight across the board and have been for months. What's happening at the college right now, where everybody's getting tested. You have all teams getting tested in different areas and whatnot. And yet, I have a friend who was in direct contact, and the county health department said, no, don't get tested because of so many false positives. And so then that's my other question: is you're seeing a lot of people that get false positives. Are those numbers then pulled out? So right now, if a campus had 64 positive tests, and then the next test comes back that they don't have it, that they're negative, are those numbers then pulled out of that big number, or do we just compound those?
Dr. Morgan, would you like to?
Usually what happens is not all tests are created equal. And that's the big issue. And we've done very poorly in this country about getting a consistent test that we're using. Some of the rapid tests that are being pushed out are only about 82% accurate, which is a very low number. What they'll say is statistically, if they had a positive one day and a negative the next day, then that probably was a false positive. I've had some particular cases at my office where they were presumed to be false positive, so they did a confirmatory different test, and if it was negative, they would assume the first one was false positive, and that would be removed from that statistic before it was added into the statistic. But they're not all created equal. We're trying to get that to happen, and the Department of Health here is trying to get that as well. Many of the testing sites are all going to, I think Abbott is what a lot of them are going to in our county. And so having a little more uniform testing type will be helpful. But there are false positives, and the rapid ones are the ones that have a higher incidence. But people want to know right away, because that's how you can return to your job, to your school. So we're going to be in a gray area there until we get a uniform test that is ideally 99% sensitive and specific, and therefore we can really believe the numbers absolutely. And we're not quite there yet. We're just not. We're getting closer, but we're not there. And that is exceptionally frustrating for those of us in the healthcare field. Believe me. So that's, I wish that some tests were better. Some colleges, again, they have money that we don't have in our school districts, are testing everybody. Colgate built a lab right there. The president is living just like the students are. They're all being run at Upstate, and Upstate is ramping out a much larger thing for the state universities. So we're trying to get uniform in the testing. And we're making progress, but we're not there yet. And maybe we'll be better off and able to test more people in the spring. But that's probably why some things have been moved to where they are. But it is a very frustrating thing, even for those of us in the health field.
Okay. All right.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
We've heard a lot about what other, hearsay about what other districts are doing. I personally think that because we don't know when this is going to end, we have a lot to learn by trying. But can you speak to what other districts are doing and aren't doing? Because there's a lot of rumor out there.
There certainly is a lot of rumor. I don't think one size fits all. What we're seeing is a real mix. So some districts are doing everything. Some districts are not. I know of a district tonight who started their board meeting at 6:30 close to us, who my understanding is that they are looking to do no sports at all. So you have a mix. Some who are doing some are doing some, and some are doing absolutely none. There is truly a mix of what's occurring. And we are seeing, just like I heard someone talk about Syracuse now, or Buffalo rather, excuse me, people are still also thinking through what they're doing and waiting for like Oswego to choose what it's going to do. So there's a mix of what's happening right now. There truly is. There is no one size that fits all. And I know that there's some people who will say, well, this district is doing that. How come we can't do it? Everybody's different. We kind of need to figure out what we want to do, but there's just a mix. There really isn't one particular thing. I hope that's the best answer I can give.
Well, our best relative would be the districts in our county. So maybe Rhonda wants to speak to it, or maybe you do, Dr. Kell. I'm not sure, but what percentage or what districts in our county are actually going forward, or are they still uncertain?
I know of 2 districts in our county right now that are in our BOCES that are saying absolutely no sports at all. And then I believe the other 7 are either thinking of full sports or some sports. Rhonda, have you heard anything different? And I hate to give names because I know one board is discussing it right now as we speak. So I don't want to put that out there on them and then it comes back on me, right? Rhonda, your thoughts?
Each district's a little different. I know in our county there's 2 definitely. In our league, like one of the big ones that everybody's waiting for to finalize scheduling is the Syracuse City School District is undecided at this point in time. And some schools are still talking to their board to see if it's just a better option to just offer varsity. Some are, because of the fact that modified still has many, many years, kids at the modified level have many more years to be able to participate. If we move forward and get past COVID or different things, parameters come into place, they have more years. So that's basically, it's up to the school district, but there are some schools that are having conversations with their boards to make this a little bit more manageable. And that's what they're looking to doing. Just like we're gonna hopefully mirror what we typically do and do a staggered start of where JV and varsity would start on one week and then the following week we'd have modified. So everybody's kind of a little bit different. Everybody's just really trying to make sure that they adhere to the regulations and kind of reduce numbers because we don't want to get ourselves in any kind of trouble when there's such limitations with capacity and the CDC regulations that we'd have to adhere to for health and safety.
Did that help, Heather? Okay, all right. So, it kind of seems like in terms of consensus, maybe we don't agree with everything, but could we live with trying each of those? I'm just wondering where the board is at. It kind of seems like at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of you are, could appear to live with that. I want to make sure. Heather, do you want to call for a vote or just wondering your thoughts?
At least a poll. I'm not sure. Whatever we decide here, I think we all need to agree that this is what we're doing, and we're going to go forward with it, and it will be trial and error because this is not going to be an exact science. We're going to be diligent and try and learn and see, what we can do as we move forward. But I think we all have to feel comfortable leaving this moment that, we're giving Dr. Calvin and Rhonda the go ahead to pursue it or not pursue it. So yeah, I'd probably a vote or just a polling would be perfect.
Jim has a question.
I just kind of want to follow up on what Tom said about doing it and doing it fiscally responsibly. And I think it also ties into, I understand the aspect of we got to just try. We got to see it. We got to try it for people. And I do understand that. But I'm looking at numbers saying, and I hate to break it down just into numbers, and it's not that, but these 4 sports would normally cost $17,000. We're talking about $170,000. So we're talking about something that we really want to try. We want to give the opportunity. But as Dr. Morgan said, based on especially some of the sports, it's destined to have problems. If everybody had to guess right now of is it or isn't it? We don't have a choice of maybe it will be a problem. If you had to pick yes or no, I think, at least personally, based on what I've heard Dr. Morgan say and the things I've heard, that yes, it is more likely that there will be a problem. And to spend 10 times the amount of money into something that we know is going to be a potential problem, it's going to the let's do it, but try in the most fiscally responsible way. And at least as we've talked about with saying carte blanche, everything, all 4 of them go. I'm just not sure I'm there.
Do you have something else to propose, Jim? Like just doing varsity and doing just practicing for the other levels, or what is your recommendation?
Honestly, I don't have one. Just the varsity, up until 2.5 minutes ago, when that was said, I had not thought of that. And so that's where I really think that this conversation has been very helpful to me and hopefully to all the people out there. Because as you asked Heather and Dr. Calvin, really said, this is not something that Dr. Calvin and his team has been taking lightly. There are a lot of different things to think about here. And so, something like, hey, just varsity or just varsity for some sports or just some sports, I had not thought through some of those issues. So, a proposal I think would be premature at the moment. Along those lines, but if there were further conversations, I think that would be helpful. If there are alternatives to just all 4 go.
I see Lisa had her hand there. Lisa?
Yeah, I would say I think the other thing that I would like to see put into place would be some kind of almost like a circuit breaker, right? So that if we find that the virus is transmitting among the members on a team. So, I work at the college, we're talking about how, seeing our numbers go up quite a bit. And so I think it's really important to have some kind of circuit breaker put into place that it may mean that these sports can go forward, but if there's what's our threshold? If there's how many infections or positive tests will it take for us to say, okay, we're pausing the sport for 2 weeks or 3 weeks to let everybody quarantine again, make sure you get past this period, and then we can move forward.
Yeah. May I respond to that for a minute? So I think the threshold needs to really it's difficult to put in a threshold because one life that's affected by COVID-19 that could be lost, it's hard to say 1 or 10 or 1 or 20 or 1. I think it has to be evaluated on each case scenario depending on what's involved in it, because one person can affect many people. So I hear you loud and clear, Lisa, but it's just hard for me to think that we would say, 10 cases, we'd have to get to 10 or 15 or even 5 or even 2 before we could say that's too many. I don't know.
Right. No, that's what I mean.
Right?
Yeah. So I think if we have, but this is, you know, I was on the fall planning committee for the college, and really, like, the devil is in the details and in the practicality of, like, how does this actually get put into place? And so what happens when you have, you know, one student who tests positive, and, you know, granted, it goes to that student is in contact with a lot of other people, but that's what I was saying before about the quarantine. Like, if that student was on the bus with the other kids or playing on the field with the other kids, like, I think we need to have set guidelines put into place. I don't want to keep, you know, having us play these, you know, bringing kids 5 days a week to practice these sports when we have, like, whatever, 2 down or then 3 down. And, like, I think we need to be able to say this, you know, there needs to be a pausing point for people to go, for the kids to go into quarantine, especially since they're not in school with each other. Like, we know that's probably going to have been the point of contact, would be the sport.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think I agree with you, Lisa, 100%. I think if it starts to be a problem, it's going to be a problem in a lot of districts. I have a feeling the state will start taking over again, but I know it's uncomfortable to rely on that. Unfortunately, I think time is of the essence. The 21st is right around the corner. This is very unfortunate. So I think we have to either feel comfortable moving ahead with the plan and kind of learning as we go, or, as Jim said, we need to not do that, put it on pause, and come up with a plan that makes more sense fiscally. But I do think we don't have a lot of time to do that. There just isn't a lot of time if we're going to go ahead and because we can't hold up schedules and other districts. So am I correct with that, Rhonda? I mean, obviously the 21st is really the date.
Right now, the 21st is the date that all the other schools that have committed to it. So schedules have been created. There are some pauses, obviously, because there are some of us in our league that are still undecided. So, you know, we're gonna meet again tomorrow. I think we've blocked off a whole day virtually to try to figure that out because, like I said, you know, there's 4 of us right now in our league that are undecided.
And can you speak to the concept of varsity only or JV varsity only, and then maybe modified as just practice? Do we save anything financially? And you know, is there any credence to that plan?
The only real savings that would be is because you're still getting the kids in, you're still paying people to supervise them. We're still having to do all the screenings and the safety regulations. Basically, you would just be eliminating, depending on what you decided, the transportation to a competition and an official's fee if it was our home contest.
Yeah, and one of the things, board, you know, if you need more time to think it through, you can certainly take that too. Not suggesting that you have to do that, but you know, there's nothing that says you can't come back and have another meeting if you want to talk through more. Certainly it's whatever you all wish.
Well, why don't we make that be the first poll? Let's go around and say, do you think you need more time? You want to discuss this more, or do you want to kind of stick with the schedule as is and make a decision tonight? So we'll just kind of, I'll go on my screen, which isn't the same as anyone else's, but Pam, we'll start with you.
I don't need any more time. I say go forward, let them try. We have to try. We have to let them try.
Kathleen.
I'm with Pam.
Linda.
Thanks, Linda.
You can say pass. Oh, you're on mute, sweetie.
Give me a minute. Go ahead.
Okay, you can say pass. I'll go to Tom.
Can I pass too? I had one question. I just wanted to ask Dr. Morgan.
Sure.
You know, just your advisor, it's not yes or, you know, what would you do? What would you advise us?
You know, we've had a lot of conversations. I wish the governor had said no sports. Mm-hmm. I think the governor pass this down because it's such a hard decision.
Right.
It is not an easy decision. And the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Academy of Family Practice clearly says we really needed to get back to school in some level because of all the mental health issues for our students. And athletics is part of it. So we absolutely needed to try, but there is no one size fits all. But I wish he had said no sports for right now. We'll reevaluate in January. That's what I wish he had said.
Right. Okay. Mine is not simple because I still think that I don't know where this money is going to come from. That's my question, and where is this? We don't have it all in there. We're spending an awful lot in terms of affecting per student, and that concerns me. I have no problem, if we could do it and we could do offsets and we can find it to execute it, then I'd say we give it a try. But it's not clear, is it?
Well, are you saying you need more time or you don't need more time?
I'd like to get a little more time, if I could, yes.
Okay. This is going to come down to a very tight vote. Lisa?
I am kind of in the same boat as Tom. I would like to know I'd like to know that we have the money in place before we just make the decision to move ahead with this. I don't think, I realize that September 21st is the deadline, and I don't think we need to wait for another 2 weeks for the board meeting. I think we probably can look at this and have, because I think we can call a board meeting to make a decision on something, and we can do that, as soon as we have that information. So for me, it's really the financial piece. I don't think there's any more guidance forthcoming on health related that's going to help make this decision one way or the other.
Nancy, did you already look at the numbers and find it somewhere or no? Okay. Jim.
I'm kind of with Lisa and Tom, and in pandemic minus economic depression, this is a no-brainer. If we got money to dump at it, dump at it. I think it's money well spent. The problem is if you don't have the money in the first place. And that's my biggest concern with it as presented. That's my biggest concern, along with the fact that there is health issues. I'm with Dr. Morgan. I wish we would have just had some leadership from the top that would have said something, but I also understand politics and understand that every district is different. A district in New York City will be different than our district. And so we are different, which allowed the easy way out for the governor. But it put the onus on us. And this is, I agreed to run for the board before a pandemic. And here we all are now, making decisions that I never thought in a million years that I would have to consider. But as presented right now, it's difficult for me. If there was more time to talk about alternatives, I'm willing to put in the time for extra meetings. But right now, it's difficult for me to support as presented.
Okay, Linda, we're back to you.
I think I'm with Lisa and Jim and Tom.
Okay,
I think
so that's 4.
I think we need more time.
Okay. I was going to actually vote to move ahead. So it's 4-3 for more time. Mathis, we had talked about scheduling for hiring coaches if this went ahead and that kind of a thing anyway. So perhaps we should schedule a meeting for later in the week.
Sure. What day would you like? The only thing that would be a challenge for us is just tomorrow is the day that the district is going through its deep cleaning. So every area is really going through a lot of sanitation tomorrow. But Thursday, Friday, what would you like for it? Saturday,
Does anyone have any conflicts? I know it's got to be after 3:30 for Pam, and we need enough time to advertise, obviously. So that's just 24 hours. And I could we maybe do Thursday, so we're not having to meet on a Friday evening?
Sure.
Does that give you guys enough time though? That's really only a day and 2 days.
We can do whatever you wish, board. We stand ready for whatever you'd like.
So that actually does bring up a question of mine. If we decide to not decide, all right, and have a meeting later on in the week, what specifically are we looking for to get out of Dr. Mathis or Rhonda, as we, move forward? So, for those who say, I'm willing to, and I'm willing to listen more. The numbers are already there. I'm willing to talk more tonight. I already told my family I may not see you until tomorrow morning. Right? Because this hits home. But my son's starting high school athletics this fall if this goes forward. And so this hits at home. So I'm willing to talk more, but I also think that if we're going to postpone a vote, we should specifically have things that we're looking for, information we're looking to gather to inform that decision. Otherwise, I think we're just putting it off and waiting for more people to send us emails.
Yeah, I agree. So why don't we go to the 4 folks who wanted more time, and why don't you let Dr. Calvin and Rhonda know the specific things that you would need to, are you looking for more alternatives? Were you looking where the money's coming from? What specifically would you like to know in between now and Thursday so we can have a meaningful vote?
For me, it's where the money would, I'm sorry, Tom. For me, it's where the money would be coming from. I think there's, as I said before, a really good likelihood that the high-risk spring sports are not going to move forward. And maybe that's where our money is, right? But I would just like to be able to look at that and make sure that that is the case, that the money would be there.
Okay.
I agree with Lisa. I think I'd like to know where the money is going to come from if we get the 20% take back.
Tom?
I'd like to know if there's any way we could do a quick survey. I know it's going to be difficult in the time period, but just to find out, because I think part of that money could come out, a large chunk could come out of transportation. I think that number is pretty high. I could be wrong on that. And like I said, we may have more students come out and therefore the number would be there. But if we could look at that and then see if there's any other places that we're going to be able to justify it. But that's what I'd like to see as well.
It's probably not enough time to do a survey.
We could try. I don't know how many people will respond to it within the 24 hours, but we certainly can put it out and see where we're at the meeting on Thursday.
Yeah, but even be Rhonda with a survey just for the coaches of those sports relative to their past participants and the players to see in terms of who would need transportation or not, and would they be able to get
I think most of the transportation needs are going to be needed in the modified level, kids who haven't ever played before. So that may be what you find out.
We can do a survey. We can put one out by tomorrow and start and do some robocalls to see what people give back to us in terms of transportation. We can get something started by tomorrow.
That'd be great, because maybe it's just enough preliminary information to be able to modify the numbers a little.
Sure.
So as a clarification, Mathis, say that we find that less students need it, but we're a big district. So if there were still 2-3 people out in Minetto and 2-3 people out in Scriba, if I remember correctly, you talked about running 4 bus routes. We theoretically still would need to hit these wide ranges because you have to wait for the elementary school kids to get dropped off, the bus to be sanitized, then you have to rerun the routes. So based on the reality of getting a practice started at a reasonable time, you would still have to maybe run those 4 routes, even if you didn't have all students on the bus. So I'm just trying to get a clarification there if we have an idea about that.
Nancy, can you help us with that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Jim. So we won't know until we actually know where the students who need transportation live. So we could potentially not be running a north, south, east, and west, but we could be running a north and a south, or an east and a west. And we won't know until we know what the participation is going to be for those sports. So I think that to be able to quantify that at this time with the data that we have, we did use the student data from last year for the sports. That could change.
I foresee needing maybe transportation really for the tryout period. And then after that, it may wane quite a bit after, people get in a rhythm and work things out. But it's just really important to have it there for the tryout period. And then, with the idea that it may have to continue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's good to budget for it, I think, regardless.
In terms of the time frame from when we are done with the elementary students to the cleaning, we do have a time frame for practices starting at 3:30. That should give us enough time to have the buses back and to be able to pick up the kids and have the buses sanitized, all in that time frame for a practice start of 3:30.
Okay.
Okay, does Thursday evening work for everyone for another board meeting to solidify? We'll have a little more transportation information, hopefully.
Could
And
we do it Friday night or Friday at 3:30? It would give us all day Thursday to pull things together.
If you need me at that Thursday meeting, I have a conflict. I have another 2-hour Google meeting. I don't know if you need me there. I'm happy if you need me here. I'm happy to do Friday as well. You people are more important than me. Don't get me wrong, but if you need me there Thursday, that would be a conflict for me.
okay, I could probably only do 1 hour from 3:30 to 4:30 on Friday, but what do other people think?
I think that's all we would need. I think. I don't think we need any more than that, because I think our decision should be made by that time, and we should be able to have that discussion. That's for myself, but.
Yeah, so I could do Thursday. I wouldn't really be available until 7, or I could do 3:30 on Friday. And no offense to Dr. Morgan, unfortunately, I don't think any of the health information is going to change between now and Thursday or Friday. So I would appreciate it.
Wait for it. I haven't heard from Pam, Kathleen, Jim about the time. Tom?
I'm good for 3:30 on Friday.
Jim?
I'm available when needed.
That's interesting to say out loud. Okay, Pam?
I can do Friday. I'll probably be a couple minutes past 3:30.
And Kathleen?
Either. I can make myself available.
Okay, and Linda you said you were available Friday at 3:30,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Okay. We'll try to keep it very concise. Mathis, does it make sense at the same time to have the resolution with the slate of coaches in the event that we vote to go ahead?
Yes, we will have that available, and you certainly can amend wherever you need to as well. So yes, we'll have it available.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. I'm thinking, because time is of the essence, board, that we will open still up maybe our sign up portal so that if people are interested and these are available, we'll at least already have had that started, because it would be very difficult if we don't start that at least tomorrow. Does that make sense? And we'll put a caveat on there that this is still up for approval. kind of, for the community. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
Does everyone else agree? Nod or say yes?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that, definitely put some kind of disclaimer that this is just a potential, which I know you're going to do. I just have to say it out loud.
Absolutely. Yeah. It'll be subject to board's approval, final approval. Okay. Okay. I think, so I heard two things. Where's the money coming from? And then a survey as to who might be needing transportation. Any other things, or is that pretty much what the board needs? We all good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right.
Would they all just the superintendent's report?
Say that again?
Is that, we're still in the superintendent's report?
Yes. I think I'm done with my report for tonight.
You are long-winded tonight, Mathis.
I just like to make sure that I thoroughly give you all the information that you need to make an informed decision. Sorry about that. Thank you. Thank you, board. I'm all set.
Thank you, Mathis.
Yes.
At this time, we'll move to the consent agenda with 2 items: minutes of the regular board meeting of September 1st, 2020, and the special education report, September 15, 2020. Could I have a motion, please?
Move it. Second.
Okay. Tom. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next is curriculum with Carrie Plass.
Hello. I only have one item, and for curriculum, it is the grant to permission to implement the listed federal, state, local grants. Most of them are title federal grants. One is the McKinney-Vento homeless grant. One is the Shinneman grant, which is for Fitchie Park for Leader and Me. And the last grant is a universal pre-K grant, which is a state-funded grant so that we can have pre-K in our schools.
Motion?
Move it.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next is personnel with Dr. Sweeney.
Hello. Tonight we have 3 retirements. I'll present those together. So upon the presentation and recommendation of Dr. Calvin, we ask that the Board of Education accept the following retirements. Whereas the following individuals were employed continuously by the Oswego City School District, and whereas they admirably served the students and staff of the Oswego City School District with their full commitment to their responsibilities and worked in partnership with their fellow employees and with their full service and dedication to the best interests of all students of our school district. Now therefore be it resolved that the Oswego City School District hereby recognizes that their service was an asset to the students and staff of our school district, and we express gratitude and sincere appreciation for their years of service. The first is Alan Hallett at the Oswego High School, has been employed with us from September 1st, 1990 until November 30th, 2020 as a mathematics teacher, and has served us for 30 years. The second is Christine Favada, an Oswego High School school monitor who has worked for us since October 22nd, 2014 until September 4th, 2020, and has worked for us for 6 years of service. And Andrew Germain, who has worked for us from August 30th, 1990 until November 30th, 2020 as a school bus driver and dispatcher, and we thank him for his 30 years of service.
Motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second?
I'll second.
Any discussion?
No, I thank you for 30 years, 2 people of 30 years of service, and the third as well. That's very commendable. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you to all, and enjoy your retirements.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Okay, our professional staff recommendations are D through J. D is an assistant principal appointment to replace Rory Malone. It is our grant-funded ESSA position. E, a professional staff resignation, Rory Malone resigning from his social studies teaching position. F, we have a leave of absence, Nick Little, because he's serving in a second tenure area. We recently appointed him as one of the instructional technology coaches. G, a probationary appointment for Chelsea Cole, special ed at KPS, replacing a resignation from a couple of months ago. H, a regular substitute appointment, Jessica Slay, elementary education at Fitchie Park, replacing Nick Little. I, an extra compensatory recommendation for an in-service instructor. We add those periodically throughout the school year. J, we mentioned these earlier, our Oswego High School extra compensatory club appointments as needed that speak to the social emotional health, as well as equity and access for our high school students. And that is through J.
Items D through J, if I could have a motion.
Move it.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion?
I just had a question relative to Fitchu, Ms. Osetic, and I didn't see anybody in terms of replacing that position, because I know she was very strong in the mindfulness program over there, and Nick was as well. So I was curious as to what we're doing there.
Absolutely. Donna Simmons is working on that replacement. That name will likely come at our next board meeting. And then you're right that leaves a bit of a gap at Fitchie Park in terms of their belonging to that school community and their mindfulness. But I'm sure there are lots of folks over there who are going to step up and carry forward the work that they had done.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
And our support staff recommendations, K through O, again, I'll present those together. We have 2 support staff resignations. Allie Babcock, she just recently was appointed as our 5-hour typist at Minetto, and Mary Warrington, an aide at Layton. We have 3 leaves of absence as presented. Reasons are included, but as we talked in our committee, we do have a number of folks for various COVID-related reasons, childcare reasons, health-related reasons throughout the district who are needing to take some sort of time off. M, a provisional appointment, Matt Schneider, our senior land tech. We did speak about this position at our last meeting. We had to hold off because we were waiting on some paperwork from City Hall that we received. N, a permanent appointment for Bradley Wygant, a custodial worker who completed his probationary period. And O, our substitute and temporary employee appointments.
Items K through O, motion please.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next is finance with Nancy Squires.
I'm going to do all A through F. These are all of the grants that are associated with the federal programs that Carrie has brought forward earlier. A is a contract with Chris Walsh. This is for her to provide embedded coaching for teachers and administrators paid from Title I, not to exceed $16,334.12. B is a contract with Ruth Taylor. This is for literacy remediation at Trinity. Community Christian School, and this is going to be paid for from Title I as well, not to exceed $2,990. Contract C is another contract with Ruth Taylor. This is to be paid from Title II, not to exceed $1,370, and this is for instructional coaching for the Community Christian School. The next one is a contract with Christine Bornheimer for additional cleaning at Trinity Catholic, not to exceed $2,868.02. And this is to be paid from their ESSER allocation, which is the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Funds from the governor. E is a contract with Linda Kuiper for kindergarten support at Trinity, not to exceed $5,903 to be paid for the GEAR funding, which is the Government Emergency Education Relief Fund. And F is the contract with Noelle Lapointe, and this is for chronic stress and trauma counseling services for our McKinney-Vento students, not to exceed $7,560.
Items A through F, motion please.
Move it.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next on the agenda is the student representative discussion.
Hi, yeah, I just have a couple points. So I don't want to drag on the student athletics conversation, but I think it's important to mention that I truly believe that our students are multifaceted people and that they're not just defined by their participation in athletics. And it would be great, sure, if it does go forward and if it's in the budget. But I truly do believe that our students are people who are who can do many things, and maybe this is an opportunity for them to learn new hobbies. And as we saw before on the agenda, there's many clubs this year. So I just thought that was an extra point to bring up. And second of all, I know myself and my peers have been feeling a little anxious. So just like a message to any students watching, just a reminder that it's important to take care of yourself during this stressful time, whatever that means for you. And, I hope that all of us as students will be able to find a sense of normalcy as time goes on. So, yeah.
Thank you so much.
That was great, Zeta.
One advice.
Zeta, if I was around you, I'd give you an elbow bump right now. Thank you. Well needed. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Next on the agenda is items from the board. Would the board have any items tonight?
I'd like to thank Dr. Calvin and Rhonda and everyone else who's put so much effort into making this hard decision about athletics. There's a lot of numbers, a lot of things that we've had to do on the fly. And, we really appreciate the effort. And I appreciate what Zeta said too. I'm so excited that clubs will go on, that we're still going to persevere despite everything, and that we are going to be offering a lot of wonderful opportunities in spite of it all. And, we're a community and we're all in this together, which is why I'd also like to just encourage our community to be careful about rumors, be careful about believing everything you hear. And we as a board are here to serve. So I would recommend that if you hear rumors about where a board is going, go right to the source. So you feel free to contact us and give us your opinions or your feelings. But I just really would like to encourage people not to take rumor as truth.
Any other items?
Yeah, I'd just like to, again, what Heather just said, but send the thank yous all the way down from Dr. Calvin to the administrators, to the support staff, to everybody that's been involved all the way through. And to try again to get that 30,000-foot view of everything that's going on. We get caught up in this, which is the athletic portion and where we are. I'm so focused on it. We're in the middle of the pandemic and we're trying to execute this huge plan, which is a moving experiment. And we're doing it right now as we go into this. And everybody's been really supportive, and it's going to need modification and adjustment and tweaking. And so as we go along, we just remember that, again, if we're all pulling in the same direction, and to the community as well, to understand the whole picture, and that everybody here is concerned and working for the same purpose. So I'd just like to say thank you to, again, all the support staff and everybody who's been there, and the administrators, the teachers, and putting in the time. And it's really appreciated.
Thank you, Tom.
Since we're having a little love fest, can I just say to the board members and the administration, I appreciate all of you, and I appreciate your input and where you're coming from, and the value that you add to being here on this board. I haven't always been on boards where you can disagree with somebody and walk away. people would hang on to it. And I really feel like this is a board that we can do that, we can disagree, and we can move forward, and nobody's holding anything against. So I really do appreciate this board.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Thanks, Kathleen. I agree with everything people have said here. Yeah, the love fest continue. I want to just throw out to the teachers too. Having 2 kids starting remotely, it's been going well. Nothing's ever perfect, but I know I can tell people are working hard. They're doing things, as a teacher myself, when you get into something that it gets a little easier over time. As a professional teacher, you're always trying to improve, but rarely ever are you asked to completely reinvent. And the fact that they're doing it and they're doing such a spectacular job, it's a credit to them. It's a credit to their supervisors and all the way up and down the chain. But I just want to say that to the teachers, because this is not normal times. And I think they've really stepped up from what I've seen, and people have been really open and thoughtful about their practice of being teachers, and their care for the students is evident. So thank you.
Yeah, I'd second that.
Well, I'll hop on because yes, thank you to all, from the support staff all the way up to our superintendent. Everybody puts in their effort. Everybody has put in, I think, 150% effort. And it isn't easy. We know that everything changes every half an hour, and then you're back redoing what you just did. We do so appreciate it. Dr. Calvin, thank you for your communication, not just to us, but to our community. They need it as well as we need it. It is so appreciated. It's something that we, didn't always have, and it's something we look forward to. So again, thanks.
Any other items tonight? At this time, could I have a motion for adjournment?
Move it.
Second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? You may adjourn.